Hey guys, Serendi here. Here is part 3 of What If Bell Cranel Was Immortal. Sorry guys. I got busy and was having a problem with my internet. Hit like and subscribe and don't forget to check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 8, Grace 8 Goddess Days. When the sun rises over the horizon and the day begins for the people of Orario, there wasn't a lot of difference in how people start their day. Some choose to head out and exercise. Others stay in bed until they were forced to get up. The most common was simply getting up, washing up, and getting ready for work. For gods and goddesses, this was no different. Ever since the Minotaur incident and Sif's arrival, mornings had started out different than what it used to be for the goddess Hestia. As per usual, she got up from bed sometime around 5 o'clock, muttering incoherent noises as she rubbed her sleepy eyes. Today was another workday, so she forced herself to get up rather than get back into bed and sleep the day away, no matter how enticing the latter option was. Once her vision was no longer blurry, she looked around the underground room and spotted Bell already awake, trying to wake Sif up. "Come on, Sif, wake up. We've got a big day ahead of us." Shaking the wolf up from her sleep, Sif let out a yawn as she stretched her limbs out before standing up, looking like she'd rather go back to sleep. There really wasn't anyone stopping the wolf from doing so, but Hestia noticed that if it was Bell who tried to wake the wolf up, said wolf would get up no matter what, ready to follow around and support her master as if it were an obligation she had to fulfill. On the other hand, if anyone else tried to wake the wolf up, they were most likely to lose a hand. Hestia herself experienced this once before. Really, it was a wonder as to why Sif liked Bell so much. It was obvious the wolf monster hated people, especially adventurers, and Bell was an adventurer. Yet the wolf follows wherever Bell goes and listens to his every word. Mentally sighing, Hestia decided to stash these thoughts away, as she didn't want questions clouding her head so early in the morning. After stretching herself, the goddess went and greeted her one and only, literally in this case, blessed child. "Good morning, Bell." "Ah, good morning, Hestia." The goddess did her best not to show how happy she was when Bell called her by her name instead of just saying goddess. Turning her head, Hestia went and greeted the wolf next. "Good morning, Sif," she said. The only thing she got in response was a simple glance. The goddess wasn't bothered the wolf's rude attitude, having grown used to it by now. Getting out of bed, Hestia along with everyone else proceeded to head into the bathroom to wash up and brush their teeth. Now the act of brushing one's teeth was an everyday, normal occurrence that was hardly worth mentioning. However, with the added, albeit unofficial, addition of Sif, Hestia was treated to quite an amusing sight every day. Standing to the side while brushing her teeth, the goddess tried her best not to let her amusement show as she watched Bell brush Sif's teeth. She shouldn't be amused, especially since the wolf's razor-sharp teeth were in full view. But the way Sif looked uncomfortable with the whole process just seemed to tickle something within Hestia. If she had to compare it to anything, it was like watching a parent or older sibling giving a reluctant kid a bath. After that little show did Hestia and Bell get ready for their respective work. Not that there was much to prepare for in her case. She simply slipped out of her pajamas, which had been given to her by Bell one day saying he had made quite the large sum of money and decided to buy one for her. She was very happy that day, and changed into her white mini dress accompanied by her signature blue ribbons. Now as for Bell, well, that was a different story. Greaves, shoulder pads, chainmail shirt, belts. There were just so many parts that made up her child's armor that it just seemed like a huge hassle to the goddess. Yet every time she finished changing, they change in separate rooms. Bell was already halfway finished putting on his armor, double-checking everything to make sure they were on securely. She didn't know how her child managed to put on a full set of armor so quickly, but she could help but frown when there was still a missing piece of the whole armor set. His gauntlet, the one she had borrowed from Bell in order to show it to her friend, Hephaestus, only to lose it the next day. She had not stopped crying that day when she had apologized to her child. She cried, even more, when he said it wasn't a big deal and that he wasn't mad at her. Truly, she was blessed to have such a kind soul as her first familia child. Which is why she would not take advantage of said kindness and would find his missing gauntlet if it was the last thing she'd do. Which is easier said than done, Hestia thought to herself as she still had yet to find the piece of armor. Though considering the fact at exactly where she had lost the gauntlet, it came to no surprise as to why the goddess had yet to find the blasted thing. She sincerely hoped that no one had found it and sold it. "Well, Sif and I are off." Blinking, Hestia was brought out of her thoughts and looked up to see Bell finished his preparations as evident at the fact that he was now wearing his helmet, hiding his face from the world. Hestia would never say it out loud, but it always feels like, whenever Bell donned all that armor, the one standing before her wasn't her blessed child. "Why yeah, have a good day," Hestia said, waving the now armored adventurer goodbye and wishing him good luck. The knight simply nodded before he and his wolf companion left the room. leaving the goddess all by herself, who then sighed. Reaching into her breast, she took out the paper that contained Bell's status. Bell Cranel, level 7, strength S999, endurance, resistance S999, dexterity S999, agility S999, magic, intelligence/faith S999, development abilities, abnormal resistance A, hunter A, luck D, escape B, magic resistance B, skills, pyromancy, sorcery, miracles, chosen undead, unkindled, lord of cinder, soul of cinder, stats, skills, level, everything was still the same. Nothing had changed, not even after a week. At first, Hestia was suspicious. Now she was worried. It wasn't that she was worried about her child still being so ridiculously strong, but more in the fact that there hasn't been a single change in his status. While he hasn't done anything to make him famous, with a status like this, by all accounts, her child should be ready to level up. Yet not a single thing was different. Not even that strange question mark next to his level. Hestia sighs to herself again, folding the paper and stashing it away. She had been keeping it to herself, worried about what she might learn. But she could no longer keep her curiosity to herself. She would have to confront her child about this. But until then, Hestia had a job to do. And that was to manage her Jagamarukuin stand. She had to do her part in supporting the familia. It was another regular morning at the Hostess of Fertility. All those that worked there woke up, did their daily morning routine, got themselves ready, and prepared the pub for the day, moving and cleaning seats and tables. If they were short on food, they would send someone out to go buy some. That was how every morning started for Seer as she swept the floor. Come to think of it, that night guy didn't show up yesterday. Chloe, a black-haired cat person, suddenly said, rearranging the tables as she spoke. He'd usually come to return Seer's lunchbox full of love after finishing it. Naya. Lunchbox full of what now? Seer thought, freezing up a little as her face started to turn slightly red. Seer even bothered to go out in search of him, Naya? Anya added, leaning on her broom and causing Seer to become even redder. I didn't go out to look for him, Seer exclaimed, as if she had the courage to do that. If she did, she would have dragged the night here a long time ago. Seer, don't worry, Ryu said, joining the conversation. Mr. Cranel isn't a man who takes your feelings lightly. I'm certain he happened to come back from the dungeon late. Ryu, the way you're talking is equally. With how serious the elf always looked, it made it hard for one to tell if she was joking or not. Don't tell me. Anya, getting close to Seer, spoke up, speaking as if she just had a revelation. He dropped dead in the dungeon. I seriously doubt that, Seer thought to herself. Bell was strong. She had seen it herself when she had run back to see if he was really alright facing so many monsters during Monsterphilia. And she had a feeling that what she saw that day was only the tip of the iceberg of Bell's abilities. No, you shouldn't say that, Naya, Chloe exclaimed, also getting close to Seer. There's no way Seer's shining knight would ever leave her behind, Naya. My, what now? Seer mentally exclaims, suddenly picturing herself in Bell's arms, his armor clean and sparkling. The girl blushed even redder at the mental image she had conjured up and tried to wipe it away. Just what in the world was she thinking? Seer, do not worry. Mr. Cranel is strong. I am sure he is safe, Ryu said confidently, even clenching her fist. Exactly as Ryu said, Naya, Anya said with a wide smile. She's right, Naya. He'd never die, Naya, Chloe added, smiling teasingly at Seer, who was, at this point, already fed up with all the teasing. Geez, what's with you all? I thought you girls didn't like Bell. Seer pointed out. She wasn't ignorant to the stares everyone in the pub was giving Bell every time he showed up. At first, it was because of how they first met, what with him almost decapitating her. But after the incident involving Loki Familia's Fenrir, that stares had taken on a more cautious vibe. It's not that we don't like him, Chol began, trying to find the right words to say. It's just that he's dangerous, Ryu said, aiding and finishing for the cat girl. Yeah, what Ryu said. Had Seer not known what Chol's past was, she would have thought the cat girl was speaking nonsense. No doubt her experience as a former assassin are what is backing up her claim. Creak. Before Seer could speak further in order to defend her armored friend, the sounds of the pub doors opening stopped all talking as everyone turned and saw the man everyone had been talking about, holding up a small basket in his hands and with his wolf companion by his side. Noticing how quiet it had gotten, Bell asked, Am I interrupting something? No. Seer noticed how fast she had said that and cleared her voice while also trying to calm down her beating heart. While the girl was quite the teaser, she herself had no defense against those who teased her. I mean, ahem, it's fine. Please come in. The knight tilted his head at her before shrugging and stepping into the pub, handing her the basket while Sif went over to a random corner and sat down, getting comfortable. Seer couldn't help but feel like she should be more concerned at the fact that a monster was getting quite familiar with the pub. I was unable to return this due to how late I returned from the dungeon last night. I hope I didn't trouble you. Oh no, it's fine, Seer insisted, taking the basket from the armored adventurer. I wasn't bothered, though I was a bit worried since you didn't say anything beforehand. Forgive me, I'll try and be more careful, the knight said, his tone honest. Seer smiled at that. She hardly ever sees the knight except during mornings, and that's only because they had built a routine where he would stop by to pick up her homemade lunch. But if that's all their relationship is, a girl giving a passing-by adventurer some food out of the goodness of her heart, then she didn't want that. She wanted to talk more and get to know the man known as Bell Cranel more. He rarely comes to the pub at night where it's the busiest, so they hardly get a chance to just talk. Would you like something to eat? I can whip something up real quick, Seer offered to the knight. Oh no, you don't have to. Seer gave Bell a look that made him pause before sighing. But, if you insist. Seer smiled. Great, I'll be right back. Turning around and heading to the kitchen, she did her best to ignore the looks the two cat girls were giving her as she got to making simple sandwiches for Bell and grabbed a big piece of ham for Sif. The girl then paused, remembering that the wolf was quite the big eater due to her size, and grabbed a few sausage links to cook. As the links sizzled, releasing quite the delicious scent, the girl grabbed a bowl and poured some milk in. Turning to see if the sausages were done, Seer grabbed a pair of tongs and placed the links onto both Bell and Sif's plates. With her preparations complete, she loaded everything onto a platter and carried them out to where the knight and his wolf were sitting at. Sorry for the wait, here you go, Seer said, placing Bell's plate down first before kneeling down and placing the plate and bowl for Sif, who spared her a glance before quickly digging into her meat. Seer couldn't help but giggle as she got up and turned just in time to see Bell move the bottom portion of his helmet up, revealing his mouth and nothing else. Am I ever going to see what you look like under that thing? Seer couldn't help but ask, pointing at the helmet. Despite being a rookie adventurer, or so Bell claimed to be, Seer had her doubts. Bell was becoming quite infamous for being the only person who walked around in full body armor. While there were others here and there in Ororio, Bell was the only one where people didn't know what he looked like under the helmet. It had gotten to the point where there were bets placed on what Bell looked like. Some say he wore a helmet to hide away an ugly scar. Others claimed that he wasn't even a human under the armor, but of a different race. There was even one who bet that Bell was a female. I keep this on for safety reasons, Bell reminded the girl as he ate his sandwiches. Oh please, this pub is possibly one of the safest places here in Ororio, Seer proclaimed, with most of the workers here being former LV. For adventurers, and with Mia being LV6, it wasn't a lie to say that this pub was indeed one of the safest places here in the city of adventurers. Tell that to those girls, Bell said, pointing over to Ryu and the others, who all jumped in surprise at being mentioned. Seer blinked in surprise as Bell spoke over to Ryu and the two cat girls. I am not so ignorant as to not notice the looks you and the other workers send at me whenever I am here. Bell finished one of his sandwiches, swallowing before speaking again. You all think of me as dangerous. It wasn't a question Bell spoke, but more of a statement. One that Ryu stepped forth to confirm. Yes, we do. Ryu. Seer turned to the elf. She knew how the others felt about Bell, yet she didn't think her friend would come right out and say it when called out. You are a mystery, Mr. Cranel, an unknown? Ryu said without stuttering, looking straight at the armored adventurer. You possess great strength, yet you are barely known. You say you are a rookie adventurer, yet your strength belies your claim. While you may act kindly and somewhat harmless, the minute you sense danger your first reaction is to attack. Once again, in short, you are a mystery, and that makes you very dangerous. It was hard to tell what Bell's reaction is to Ryu's words, but from the way his mouth was a simple straight line, Seer could see that the knight wasn't the least bit fazed at the elf's words against him and simply responded with, I see. Silence soon reigned over the entire pub. Seer stood awkwardly as she looked between Ryu and Bell, who were practically having a staring contest. Even Chol and Anya were looking at the two nervously. However, suddenly, breaking the silence, Ryu spoke up. Despite all this, you can be trusted. Oh, Seer couldn't see it because of the helmet, but she got the feeling that Bell was raising an eyebrow at the elf. What makes you say that? While we have had little interaction, I know and have seen from your actions that your kindness is genuine. Back during Monsterphilia, according to Seer, you led the monsters away as to not endanger the lives of civilians. And back in the alleyway, you protected that palum without asking for any rewards, you just did it. That shows you are a kind person. Bell doesn't say anything back at first. He just lowers his head and his mouth forms a small frown. I'm not as kind as you think. Perhaps, Ryu said bluntly. Someone of your strength appearing out of the blue has made us all wary of you, but I now know enough that you would never try to harm anyone intentionally unless provoked. In short? In short? Bell repeated, waiting for the elf's conclusion. "You're strange." Rear opened her mouth, but she did not speak those words. Turning her head, Seer and everyone saw Mamma Mia walking down the stairs, already dressed for work. Walking over to Ryu, she crossed her arms and looked down at the armored adventurer. "You wouldn't know this since you barely come to our pub at night, but there have been a few merchants talking about you." "About me?" Bell pointed to himself and Mia nodded. Bell looked over at Seer and she nodded as well, confirming what Mamma Mia said. "They all talked about how kind and generous you are for taking on their quests when most adventurers would rather be in the dungeon. They also talked about how reliable you've been acting as their bodyguard when moving between trade posts." Seer nodded at Mia's words. "It's true that there have been a few merchants stopping by their pub for a quick drink and a bite to eat." Imagine her and everyone's surprise when they started talking about a certain armored adventurer and his wolf companion. Being the curious person she was, Seer wanted to hear more and learned about how the knight defended merchants from monsters when on the road, always making sure not even a single beast got close to the merchants and their cargo. There had even been talking of an armored adventurer going to villages and helping them with problems involving monsters. That part seemed to have caught Ryu's interest, Seer noted. "Seems you've been doing a lot of good, Mr. Knight," Mia said, giving Bell an amused smile. "I just do what I can," Bell said with a nonchalant shrug before getting up, having finished the sandwiches Seer gave him. Looking down, it seems Sif was done with her breakfast as well, finishing up the bowl of milk soon after. "Heading off to the dungeon?" Mia asked before saying, "Try not to die in there or else Seer will cry." "Mamma Mia!" Seer exclaimed, blushing in embarrassment. "I will try," was Bell's response as he pushed down the bottom portion of his helmet, once again hiding his face from the world as he and Sif made their way to the door. But just as the knight was about to leave, he stops and turns to everyone in the pub. So? Seer repeats after the adventurer, wondering what was the matter. "If you all trust me, then does that mean I can still come here?" Bell asks in a somewhat innocent tone. Seer would never admit it out loud, but it made the knight sound cute. With a bright smile, Seer said to the armored adventurer, "Of course, come on by any time." "Sif too," said Wolf, glanced over at the girl and just stared at her for about a minute before turning away. Noticing the fact that the canine monster had looked at her for more than a second, Seer's smile seemed to have brightened even more. Perhaps she was finally starting to get past the wolf's walls. "Sure." Bell nodded and turned to leave before stopping once again and turning to Seer. He then said to her, "Let's talk later." If before Seer's smile was bright, now she was practically beaming. With a big smile accompanied by a blush, Seer gave the knight her response. "Yeah." After saying that, did Bell nod and finally took his leave with Sif, as always, following close behind. "He's a strange one, he is, truly," Mia said with crossed arms, standing next to Seer. "Yes, but I think that just makes him all the more interesting," Seer said, still smiling. "Oh ho ho ho." Even without having to turn around, Seer could tell Chloe and Anya were smiling teasingly at her. "Not one word." "We didn't say anything." With hands up in surrender, the cat girls smiled to themselves even in the face of Seer's threat. "All right, enough standing around. This place isn't going to set itself up." With a few powerful claps, Mia ordered everyone to get back to work. With a bit of reluctance, Seer and the others did as told and got back to work, setting the tables and chairs where they needed to be. As Seer worked in silence, her mind was accompanied by a single thought. "Let's talk later." "Talk later," he said. That meant there was a possibility that the knight might stop by the pub later at night. Smiling to herself, Seer was looking forward to tonight. "Let's see. I'll have an Azuki bean cream, 3 matcha, and an original please." "Azuki, 3 matcha, and original." "There you go." With a smile, Hestia gave the customer his order after receiving payment and waved him goodbye before turning to the next customer in waiting. Jagamarakuin, or simply potato croquettes if you didn't want to be fancy, was quite a popular street food. Costing a measly 30 to 40 valis, the street snack was quite popular among civilians. Hestia had been quite surprised by this at first when she started working out, but has since gotten used to working here and was glad the fried potato treat was so popular. It certainly helped when making money for her familia. Depending on sales, the goddess could earn in a week half of what an average party of rookies could make down in the dungeon. One might find it amusing to see a goddess, a being of high power, working at a food stand, but in the age where gods mingle with people of the lower world, it had grown to be quite a common sight. That was especially true for small and low-ranking familias, as gods and goddess alike had to work in order to support the familia. Only familias of high ranking didn't have to worry about working to support their familia, as their members alone could do all that. Of course, this did not mean gods reluctantly did business. Besides exploring the dungeon, some familias dealt into business such as industrial and even medical. An example would be the Demeter familia, who dealt in business and agricultural as its many members, which outnumber even the Ganesha familia if one included non-combatants, work the fields in harvesting fruits and vegetables. Their produce is well-liked and considered high quality across the city. It's no wonder considering they are in charge of the city's food. Back to Hestia, the goddess waves goodbye to a kid, thanking the goddess for the treat. At first, Hestia had been quite negative about working this friend potato stand, but in time she's grown used to working here. One thing was for sure though, this was one of many things she didn't expect to find herself in when she descended from the upper world. But as mentioned before, she's grown used to it and has even come to enjoy it somewhat. Now if only the manager would stop insisting she'd be the food stand's mascot. She needed money, yes, but she was still a goddess and would not lower herself that far. Yo, Chibi! Suddenly, a high-pitched voice called out to the goddess, and Hestia, who was on break, turned before flinching. Guh? What is she doing here? Hestia muttered to herself as her longtime enemy, Loki, was walking over to her food stand waving her hand. I see you're still working at this food stand here. Truly you are an existence that transcends the world, Loki said, her mocking tone obvious to all. Loki, if you just came here to annoy me then leave. I'll throw salt at you if you don't, Hestia exclaims angrily, reaching for a bag of salt from under the stand. Oi, what do you think I am? An evil spirit? Can't a goddess like me come over once in a while to laugh at another goddess, so poor she can't even get others to join her familia? Loki said before laughing. Gore, are you trying to pick a fight? Because I'm serious about the salt, Hestia said, taking out the bag of salt mentioned earlier to prove her point. Now, let's not get violent here, Loki said, crossing her arms and leaning on the food stand, staring face to face with the short goddess as her mocking smile vanishes and is replaced by a serious frown. Such a fast change from the red-headed goddess surprised Hestia and made her tense up. Jokes aside, I'm here on a personal matter, Loki said, getting right down to it. What can you tell me about that bastard? Who? Hestia raised an eyebrow, confused as to who Loki was talking about. You know, the bastard calling himself Marvelous Chester, Loki said, saying the name with spite that was clear to Hestia, who finally understood why Loki was so serious. She must still be trying to look for the person using her late child's name, the goddess thought. For the first time, Hestia felt sympathy for the goddess in front of her. To know that there was someone going around using her late child's name must have infuriated the redhead. Really, who could be so low as to walk around using a dead person's name for themselves? Sorry to say, but I can't tell you much. All Bell, my child, ever told me was his name and barely anything else, Hestia said, having no info to give to the trickster goddess. There's got to be something you can tell me. I'm going out of my just coming here to talk to you, Loki said, looking desperate. I'm sorry, but there's really nothing I can tell you, Hestia said. Have you tried asking around for any info about this marvelous guy? Why the heck do you think I'm here? Loki said. I've asked around just about everywhere in Ororio from the casino to the goddamn entertainment district. No one's ever heard of the guy. So basically, I'm the last person she came to, Hestia thought. Look, I want to help you, much as I am reluctant to, but there's nothing I can give you that'll help. Well, what about the child of yours? Loki asked. From the way you've been talking, it sounds like he's probably the only one who knows about the bastard. True, Hestia thought. From the looks of it, Bell may be the only one who knows anything about this marvelous Chester person. Of course, considering this guy was going around using not only Loki's child's name but also her emblem, that begged the question as to how Bell knew such a person. Bell didn't seem like the type to associate with such a person. Then again, he has been acting different since the Minotaur incident, Hestia thought to herself. Oi, where's your kid right now? Loki asked, her tone casual if not a bit disrespectful. Hestia decided not to bring it up and let it slide. She wasn't petty that she demanded respect. At this time he's probably in the dungeon already, Hestia said. I can't tell you when he's coming back because it's always different. Sometimes he comes back early, other times he's late. Well then can you tell him that the goddess Loki wants to talk to him? Loki asks. Yeah, sure. I'm serious, Chibi. This is important for me. I'll tell him when he gets back. I promise, Hestia said. While she may not like Loki, she wasn't heartless as to deny the goddess' request. It was clear to anyone just how important this was for the redhead. This Chester guy must have been really important to her, Hestia thought to herself. She might not fully understand, but she could somewhat guess and maybe even sympathize with the trickster goddess. After all, if she lost Bell and someone was going around using his name, she'd probably be on a manhunt herself. Okay. Thanks, Loki said before standing up and walking away, leaving Hestia alone and stunned. In her mind, she was processing the fact that Loki, her longtime enemy, had just thanked her. Geez, I knew descending to the lower world changed her, but by this much? Hestia said before sighing. After hearing that, she had to tell Bell about meeting up with Loki later. While she didn't like the idea of her Bell getting anywhere near the trickster goddess, she also knew that the way Bell is right now, he could handle himself. "Excuse me? Can I order?" Snapping out of her thoughts, Hestia looks up to see some customers waiting. Looks like her break was over. Time to get back to work. "What would you like, sir?" She watches him, leaning comfortably in her chair with a wine glass in hand. Freya looks through her newly brought god's mirror and watches the person of her interest, Bell Cranel. The goddess of beauty twirls the wine glass in her hand around absent-mindedly as she smiles at what the mirror was showing her. There he was again, sword and shield in hand, and wearing that grimy full-body armor of his. It almost brought a frown to her face to see armor reinforced with titanite having been cleaned half-heartedly. But the war goddess aspect inside of her had figured out that the adventurer had done this deliberately. Many forgot this due to the fact that they were always fighting up close or afar, but most monsters had keen senses such as hearing and smell. The fact that the armored adventurer left his armor in such a state was so that he masked his own scent, enabling him to hide from a monster's keen sense of smell. It certainly explained how the knight got the jump on most monsters, as no doubt the smell of blood was a scent monsters had grown used to smell. It was quite ingenious if one thought about it. Now if only he could take off that helmet of his, Freya thought to herself. If there was one thing she was quite peeved about, it was the helmet that Bell always hid his face under. While she wasn't that bothered by it, just once she'd like to see what the boy looked like under all that armor. From her encounter with Hestia back during Monsterphilia, the only thing she knew was that the knight had white hair and red eyes hidden under that helmet of his. Of course, this didn't help the goddess in picturing what the knight may look like. Lady Freya. Ah. It seems she's accidentally neglected her champion while lost in thought. "Forgive me, Otter. I was just lost in thought." The champion Otter, captain of Freya's familia, shook his head. He wasn't bothered by Freya's lack of attention to him. Unlike so many in the familia, he understood that Freya's love was like the wind, ever-changing and free, could not be tied down. Though in this case his goddess right now was just really interested in this person known as Bell Cranel. Whether he receives his goddess love has yet to be seen. Freya smiles at the Boaz. Really, why couldn't all her children be as understanding as Otter? Though that didn't make them any less adorable to her. Turning back to her mirror, Freya continued to watch her person of interest battle the likes of hellhounds, small groups of almarej, battle boars, and many more. To any experienced adventurer, they would have recognized that the knight was currently in the 13th floor of the dungeon. That also meant he was in the middle floors, a place only LV2s and higher-leveled adventurers were supposed to be at. Had she not known about Bell's true strength, or at least a fraction of it, she would have been quite surprised. Add in the fact that his party only consisted of a supporter and a wolf monster. Anyone who didn't know the knight would have thought him crazy for being down there. "Otter," Freya spoke, watching in amusement as she witnessed Bell slice off the tail of a wyvern. She couldn't help but notice the knight tended to always go for the tail when facing dragon-type monsters. "Yes, Lady Freya? Tell me, what do you think of this Bell Cranel?" Freya asked, wanting to get the opinion of someone else on their thoughts about the knight. "He is a mystery," Otter said, looking at the armored adventurer through the mirror. He watched as the knight took out a black, sphere-shaped object and threw it into the mouth of a dungeon worm. Seconds later, the monster exploded from the inside. The way he holds himself suggests one who has seen much in his life. He is strong, yet he insists on holding himself back. To be frank, he is a strange one, Lady Freya. Freya smiles at her captain, liking his honesty. She takes a sip from her glass before speaking again. Yes, indeed, he is a strange one, but that just makes him all the more interesting. Even now, through this mirror, she could see it, that flame-like soul of his, gentle 1 minute before wild the next. She was still quite upset about no longer being able to witness that clear, transparent soul of his, but the way he is now was just as interesting. Suddenly, the knight stops moving. Seconds later, he turns his towards her and Freya in response quickly deactivates her mirror, not wanting to lose another one after what happened last time. It would be some time before Freya could use the mirror without alerting the armored adventurer. But she could wait, she was a goddess after all. She had all the time in the world. "Otter," Freya spoke up, "were you and the others able to learn what I wanted?" "Yes," Otter nodded. "It was Alan who brought in this info." Apparently, Bell Cranel's sudden growth in strength seems to have stemmed from an encounter with a Minotaur down in the upper floors. Ah yes, she heard about that. Apparently, there were a few Minotaurs that had appeared on the upper floors and that Loki's kids had taken care of it fast enough to avoid any major casualties. Without having to be told, Freya could already guess that those same kids were probably responsible, or at least had some part in the incident, or how else were they able to react so quickly. "I see," Freya simply said, taking the info and going over it with what she knows so far. With some research done by her wonderful children, her person of interest, Bell Cranel, had arrived in Orio about a month ago and, after being rejected by multiple other familias, became an adventurer under Hestia who had recently descended from the upper world. Which means, by all accounts, the boy should still be nothing more than an LV1 rookie. Of course, with what she witnessed back in Monsterphilia when she released those monsters, the strength she saw was anything but the strength of an LV1. Sure, the Falna that gods and goddess alike grace to people didn't account for past experiences before receiving the blessings. It was unbelievable for a person of Bell's strength to have gone unnoticed for so long, especially by her, since her discerning eye would have immediately picked up on someone of Bell's strength, which just made it all the more confusing as to the boy's sudden transformation. A Minotaur, huh? Freya mutters to herself, taking sips from her glass while she does so. Minotaurs were bull-like monsters found mostly around the middle floors of the dungeon, located in the 15th to 17th floors. For LV2 adventurers, they were considered one of the strongest monsters to face. It was basically suicide for any LV1 adventurer to face one, and they'd be lucky to just escape with their lives. If an encounter with a Minotaur was the cause of Bell's newfound strength, then obviously something had happened. Freya looked back at the god's mirror but did not activate it. Instead, she pictured the armored adventurer and imagined him transforming into that ghastly, flaming figure. Just thinking about it sent shivers down her spine. "Otter," Freya called out to her champion again where he awaited his orders. "Yes, Lady Freya? I need you to do something for me." She had to know. She had to see exactly just what this new Bell was capable of. Only then will she know if this person will merely become a passing interest, or deserving of her love. Today was a very rough day, Ace thought to herself. Yes, even a first-class adventurer like her had her rough days every now and then. Though with the way she usually acted, one would find it hard to believe that she almost died today. "Are you sure it was okay to leave that drop item with Boris?" Riveria asked. The drop item the jade-haired high elf was talking about was the large, black sword used by Eudeus, the monster Rex of the 37th floor. Ace had just battled it not too long ago, alone might she add, and barely managed to come out on top. The quick, but not so professional patchwork to the swordswoman's armor could tell all that Ace had not come out of that fight unscathed. Really, it had taken nearly all of the elf's willpower not to jump in and assist the blonde beyond casting support magic. She, of course, made sure to properly heal Ace once the battle was over. The girl had been bleeding all over the place. "Yeah." Ace nodded. It wasn't like she could have used the sword anyway, what with how big it was. Plus, she didn't really use large swords in the first place with the way her fighting style is. Besides, if someone begs like that, both Ace and Riveria think back to what happened on the 18th floor. The scene of Boris, the one in charge of Rivera, begging for the Eudeus drop item had been quite the spectacle. Just thinking about it made the high elf sigh. Weird incidents out of the way, Ace felt pretty proud of herself. After the incident involving the red-headed tamer, the blonde had truly felt just how weak she still was and how much she still needed to grow. But after today, after defeating that monster Rex all by herself, Ace truly felt she had gotten stronger. But until she made it back to the Twilight Manor and have Loki update her status, she would have to wait and see just how much she's grown. Clang clang fwoosh. Ace blinks when the sounds of battle reached her ears. There were still adventurers down here at this time? While she didn't have a watch on her, Ace could make a guess and say that it should be nighttime up on the surface currently. "Is something wrong?" Riveria asks, and Ace shakes her head. If adventurers were still down here, then they must be farming for money if not more experience. If one was low on money, then it should be no surprise that adventurers were still down here at this time. She herself has had a few late nights in the dungeon whenever the Familia was running low on funds. Adventuring down to the deep floors required adventurers to stock on a lot of items and maintain their weapons constantly. In short, adventuring as they did wasn't cheap. Walking up the stairs, both women made it to the 13th floor, and by that time, the echoes of clanging steel had ceased. Ace didn't like that, but since there wasn't any screaming, it told her that whoever was down here had simply stopped, probably to take a break. "Master Bell, Lily thinks we should head back up now, it's getting late." From up ahead, a young girl's voice speaks up. Ace instantly picks up a familiar name in that sentence. A hum was heard, the sound of someone in thought before there was the sound of clanking metal. It was a familiar sound. "Ace," Riveria called out to her as unknown to Ace. She had sped up her pace, walking fast until she soon came to a stop. Turning his head, a familiar helmet turns towards her. She could hardly believe it. There he was, crouching down to pick up magic stones while still donned in that same armor of his was the boy known as Bell Cranel. She hasn't seen him since she saw him run past her back during the incident at Monsterphilia. Accompanying him was that same wolf, looking suspiciously at her as if she would attack at any moment, and a palom no. She had a tail, so a chianthrope? She was quite small, and the huge bag behind the small girl told Ace that she was a supporter. "You are." The night began. standing up but soon gets interrupted by his supporter. Eh? Ace Wallenstein? The small Chianthrope expressed surprised at her. What's the sword princess doing here? Ace didn't respond back simply because she didn't know what to say. She didn't expect to run into the knight down here on the 13th floor. Though given his strength, it came to no surprise to Ace that he was fine down here despite his party lacking numbers. Still didn't help that she didn't know what to say right now. Thankfully, Riveria had finally caught up with her. Ace, what's the matter? The high elf asked until she noticed the knight and his companions. HM? You are. Now it's 9 hell Riveria? The supporter exclaims in surprise again. Shaking now, Ace wondered if they were the cause. They weren't that scary to them, were they? Calm down, miss. We were just passing through, Riveria said until she blinks, noticing the wolf by the knight's side. Sif was her name if Ace remembered correctly. Isn't that a monster right next to you? The high elf asks the knight, pointing out how close the wolf was to the armored adventurer. Ace soon realized that this was the first time the high elf has seen Sif. The knight doesn't respond right away as the wolf bares her teeth and growls. In response, Riveria grips her staff as to the side. The supporter starts to grow even more nervous. Quickly, Ace steps in to intervene, grabbing Riveria's hand and shakes her head. Meanwhile, Bell calms his wolf companion down by placing a hand over her head and waits until the canine monster stops growling. Once that was done, does the knight turn back to them. Sif here means no harm, he said in a dispassionate tone which surprises Ace. She doesn't remember the knight talking like that before. It made her think back to the incident at the pub. It still made her shiver just thinking about it, which was surprising considering what she's been through these past few weeks. Forgive me, I meant no trouble, Riveria apologized, bowing her head a little. It's fine. Sif always acts like this towards people, adventurers especially, Bell said, scratching behind Sif's ears. From the way the wolf's tail wagged back and forth, she liked it. Why are you two down here this late? The knight suddenly asks. Our party was on its way back to the surface when this one here. Riveria directed her gaze to Ace, who flinched a little. Decided it was a good idea to fight a monster Rex all by herself. You fought a monster Rex by yourself? The supporter exclaims loudly, looking at the blonde swordswoman in surprise. Monster Rex. Bell tilts his head, confused. What's that? He doesn't know what a monster Rex is? Ace thought, surprised. Even Riveria was surprised, no doubt thinking how someone of his strength didn't know about the most powerful monsters in the dungeon. It's just like that time where she helped the knight at Babel Tower, a lack of common knowledge. Master Bell, you don't know what a monster Rex is? The knight shakes his helmet-covered head. How can you not know about a monster Rex? The knight simply shrugs his shoulders in response. This causes the supporter to sigh. A monster Rex. The one who spoke up was Riveria, taking the lead in explaining to the armored adventurer what a monster Rex is an especially powerful monster that only appears on certain floors. Unlike common monsters, it takes a monster Rex much longer to respawn due to how powerful one is, with timing being different depending on how powerful a monster Rex is. We tend to call them floor bosses because of this. I see, was Bell's short reply to the high elf's explanation. I see, Riveria repeats after the knight, probably having expected a different reaction. She shakes her head before looking suspiciously at the armored adventurer. How is it that you don't know what a monster Rex is? Ace wondered that too and looked at Bell, waiting for his answer. I have simply never heard of them until now, was his response before he mutters to himself, something about talking to someone later. I see, Riveria said, having nothing else to say than that. What are? Ace suddenly spoke up, getting everyone's attention, which caused the girl to pause for a moment. She had simply spoken because she didn't want to be left out, having been silent for the most part while Riveria did all the talking. Composing herself, Ace spoke again, her words directed towards the knight. What are you doing here? The armored adventurer tilted his head in response, confused by her question. Ace didn't have an ulterior motive behind her question. She simply wished to know what the knight was doing here. That was all. To compare, it was like she was asking someone, how was your day? Of course, no one could have known that what with the way she asked. But instead of questioning her like she expected, the knight went and answered her question instead. We're simply trying to make some extra money. He patted one of the many pouches hanging around his waist, no doubt full with magic stones if the sound it made was any indication. We were just about to head back to the surface. I see, was all Ace said, having no further response than that. Silence soon settled in, making everything awkward. Come on, is that all you can say? Ace thought to herself, imagining a younger version of her saying that to her. It wasn't that she was airhead like most people claim, but it was just that the blonde was mentally young. Of course, if people were to look into her mind and see this, some would probably question her sanity. We should probably take our leave now, Riveria suddenly spoke up, breaking the silence as Ace turned towards the high elf. We best not keep the others waiting any longer. Come on. We should do the same, Master Bell, the supporter said to the knight, who nodded in agreement. Ace looked back and forth, not knowing what to do or say. She had wanted to talk longer with the armored adventurer, but the sword princess really didn't know what to say to extend the conversation as she had nothing to go off of. Really, just why did she want to talk to the knight so badly? She barely knew him and vice versa. So why? Let's just say the gods screwed me over. Ah, that's right. Back then, she sensed something from the knight. Something similar yet also different. The embers of a flame similar to hers. She didn't know what it was, but it was enough to make her curious of the one known as Bell Cranel. Just as she and Riveria took their leave, Ace stopped and turned back towards the knight and his group. She spoke up, getting everyone's attention, but her focus was on the armored adventurer. Her eyes moved all over the place, trying to find anything she could talk about. And luckily for her, she found one when her eyes landed on Bell's left arm. Your gauntlet? I have it, Ace said, remembering the piece of armor she had picked up back during Monsterphilia. With the incident involving that red-haired woman back on the 18th floor and fighting Eudeus, she had completely forgotten about it. The knight looks at his gloved left hand, which used to be covered by a gauntlet, the last time Ace met him, before looking up towards her and asked, You have my gauntlet? Ace nodded. I picked it up back at Monsterphilia. I see, came Bell's short response. How do you know it's mine? During Monsterphilia, I saw you running, Ace explained. I heard something fall and saw the gauntlet at my feet, so I picked it up. I see. The knight gave another short response. This confused Ace a little as she remembered the knight being much more talkative the last time they met. He then asks, Do you have it with you? Ace shakes her head. She had left the gauntlet back in her room at the Twilight Manor. She already had her own set of armor, and there was little to no reason in carrying the piece of metal around. I see, was the armored adventurer's short response again. Is that all he can say? Ace couldn't help but wonder. The knight seemed to be saying that a lot. And once again, just like their last meeting, Ace felt like she had spoken the most between the two of them. Don't stop now. Keep going. Her thoughts, which took the form of a younger Ace, said to her. Mentally nodding, she spoke up again. I can give it back to you, if you want. Of course, he wants it back. It's his. Ace practically screamed in her mind, berating herself for asking such a thing. I do, Bell responds back, prompting Ace to come out of her thoughts and focus back on the conversation right now, if you can even call this a conversation. Then, we can meet up at the guild tomorrow, and I can give it to you then. Sure, came Bell's instant reply. Ace was kind of jealous at how calm Bell was while she was here being awkward and all. Then, nevertheless, Ace found herself smiling for some reason. I'll see you tomorrow. Instead of answering with words, the knight responded by nodding his head. Nodding back, Ace turned around and left with Riveria, who had been waiting until Ace was done. You seem happy, the high elf said, getting Ace to turn to her. Do I? She asked, and the elf nodded. Ace hummed to herself, having nothing to deny Riveria's claim. She touched her face, checking to see if she was still smiling. Swoosh. A small sound slicing through the air. A rookie adventurer might have missed it, but Ace heard it coming a mile away. Reacting quickly, she drew her sword, desperate, and deflected a stone axe barely the size of her headgear. Looking up ahead, she saw a small group of Almiraj, 5 in total, with all but one of them wielding landform weapons, all the form of hand axes. Once upon a time, these rabbit-like monsters may have been a threat to Ace, but that was all in the past. As a high-class adventurer, these monsters stood no chance against the likes of her and Riveria. As she readied her sword, Ace guessed it would only take a second to finish off these rabbits. Whoosh! Just as Ace was about to spring forth, she felt heat wash over her entire body. She blinked in surprise as a fireball the size of a person's head struck the group of Almiraj and killed them instantly, leaving behind nothing but ashes before those two disappeared into thin air. Not even a magic stone or a drop item was left behind, having been destroyed by the flames. Ace blinks again before she slowly turns her head towards the one who had thrown the fire earlier. With his left hand slightly steaming and stretched out, the culprit was none other than Bell Cranel. From within the slits of his helmet, Ace could make out an ominous red glowing eye as a certain pressure seemed to surround the knight. But a second later, both the glowing eye and the pressure around him disappeared as soon as they appeared, making Ace wonder if it had been her imagination. Of course, considering she had seen the phenomenon before. Are you all right? Bell asked, lowering his hand and turning over towards them. Yes, Ace said, sheathing her sword. She turned to Riveria to, unsurprisingly, find her completely fine as the elf lowered her staff. Haven raised it just in case Ace needed help. While it was undead, it was the thought that count. Good, Bell said as he and his group walked past them. We shall go on ahead. Be careful on your way back. Aide simply nodded as she watched the knight and his group leave, going up the stairs that would take them to the floor above, and watched until they were gone. Now alone, she turned to Riveria. You noticed it too? The high elf asked, and the blonde responded by nodding. They both turned back to the spot where the group of Almiraj had been practically incinerated by Bell's fire attack. And what an attack it was. Despite its size, the spell was powerful, releasing a heat wave which completely washed over Ace, making her feel as if she were standing in front of a fire. But that's not what had gotten her attention. There was no chant, Ace pointed out. When she and Riveria were attacked, they were not that far from Bell's group. If the knight were to use a spell in order to deal with the rabbit monsters, they would have heard the chant. But as she pointed out before, there had been none. A no-chant magic spell? It was certainly possible since her magic only needed her to call its name in order to activate it. But the problem was that not even the name of the spell had been spoken by the armored adventurer. Even if he had a magic spell that required no chanting, there should have at least been a need to call out the name of the spell. But she and Riveria had heard none. The fire that Bell had conjured up had appeared as if he were simply snapping his fingers. To people who used magic like her and Riveria, it was unheard of. Ace, Riveria spoke up, turning to the stairs in which Bell and his group had taken not too long ago. What was that man's name again? I'm afraid I never quite caught it. Bell Cranel. Ace mutters the name as she too looks towards the stairs the armored adventurer had taken. She didn't think it was possible, but the man had become even more interesting. If the swordswoman wasn't interested in the knight before, now she was. Slam. A big plate of fish was slammed right in front of Bell, said food practically jumping off the plate when it struck the counter table they were sitting at, making it look like as if the fish were still alive even with all the sauce and herbs covering it. Lily couldn't help but flinch from how loud the slam was. Looking down at the fish placed in front of him, Bell soon looked up at the girl. Seer was her name, as Lily had been told earlier, who was smiling Raider sinisterly. I didn't order this, Bell said, pointing down to the plate in front of him. Next to him was a small stack of empty plates, having been previously filled with food similar to the one in front of him right now. Oh Belle, you're so funny. The girl Seer laughed with that same twisted smile of hers. Lily would admit that the girl was beginning to scare her. And with their earlier meeting with the Sword Princess and Nine Hell, Lily had to wonder just why her employer knew so many intimidating people. A strong man like you needs to eat big, or how else are you going to charm other women? Tilting his head in confusion, Belle said, I don't follow. Of course, he didn't. Lily thought to herself as she drank her mug of ale, taking small sips. She needed to go home later, so she couldn't drink much, unlike the knight next to her, who had already gone through 5 mugs of ale which had come with the earlier plates. While she didn't know what her employer looked like, she knew he was young from the sound of his voice. The fact he wasn't even drunk yet surprised the secret Palum. More so when he was able to go through his earlier dishes with little to no trouble. Bell lifted up the plate in front of him, looking at it as he hummed before he looked down to where Sif was at, sitting right behind his seat as she chewed away at a piece of steak. It greatly surprised Lily how the pub allowed a monster into the building, though seeing how Bell knew the people here, they were probably familiar enough with Sif to let her in so long as she didn't cause any trouble with the other customers here. Sif. Hearing her name, the wolf stopped eating and looked up at her master where he presented the plate of fish to her. Do you want this? Idiot. Lily and all the other maids of the pub plus the owner all looked at the armored adventurer as if he were the greatest fool in the world, which may not be that far of a stretch in Lily's opinion. Glancing awkwardly to the side, the Palum saw the seer girl was seething right now, though one probably couldn't tell due to the not-so-innocent smile on her face. It got even worse when Sif took the plate from Bell and dug into it with no hesitation. Lily gulped down nervously when she saw Seer beginning to bend the metal platter in her hands. Excuse me, can I have another ale? One of the many customers here suddenly called out, completely oblivious to the current situation. Coming. As if flipping a switch, Seer sang in a benevolent tone as though she hadn't been about to start a bloodbath earlier. And to the Palum's amazement, Bell looked like he hadn't noticed the bloodlust spewing from the girl. I wonder why Seer was so mad? Scratch that, it seems he did notice but didn't know the reason why. Somehow that still amazed Lily. I knew you were strange, Master Bell, but I didn't think you were an idiot. Lily didn't hold back in her insult towards her employer, knowing full well that he wouldn't react negatively towards her comment. Off to the side, the maids of the pub all nodded in agreement with her. Shouldn't they be working right now? What do you mean? Bell asked, tilting his head. Lily couldn't help but notice that he did that a lot. Of course, with his helmet covering his face 24/7. He probably did it just to convey his confusion to others. Nothing, Lily sang as she took a bite out of her dish. The food was good, she'll gladly admit, but she wished it wasn't so expensive. Good thing she and Bell had gained a lot in today's dungeon diving. 50,000 Valis total. That's how much they made today. Lily could still hardly believe that the adventurer next to her had earned more than what two parties of rookie adventurers could make in a day. She had been quite hesitant when her employer suggested they go down to the middle floors of the dungeon. But if it reaped this much cash, Lily couldn't complain. Really, if it wasn't for how strong Bell and Sif were, the Palum would have suggested they'd increase their party members before tackling the middle floors, even if it was just the entrance. To celebrate earning so much money, Bell had invited Lily to go eat with him and Sif to a pub they know of. Seeing no problem as the night was treating her, Lily accepted. Though, if Lily knew she was going to be a homewrecker, she would have declined. Lily thought to herself as she took a small sip from her mug. Really, the knight had promised that seer girl he would come by tonight and he goes and brings her along. And here she thought her employer was smart. Master Bell really is inconsiderate. Lily casually threw that out before taking another bite of her dish. How so? Bell asked. The fact he even asked that made Lily want to facepalm herself. The maids of the pub all looked like they were on the verge of doing that themselves. Lily is surprised you can even say that, Lily said, sighing in sympathy for poor Seer. You made a promise to Miss Seer that you would come here tonight, right? Lily thinks she was looking forward to being alone with you. But we would not be alone, Bell said, gesturing down to Sif, who had long since finished the fish he had given to the wolf earlier and was back to chewing on her steak. Sif is here with us. Lily felt like sighing again but chose not to. That's not the problem. The problem is you brought another female here with you. Once again, Bell gestures down to Sif. Sif is a female. This time, Lily and the rest of the maids here did not hold back and facepalmed themselves, getting confused looks from all of the patrons here. Even the owner went and facepalmed herself. It's like every word Lily says just bounces off that helmet of his. Lily thought in agitation, growing frustrated with the knight. Technically speaking, what he had said had been all true, but still. Master Bell does not know the way to a maiden's heart, Lily said as she finished her mug of ale before placing a few val on the table. Here, Lily will call it a night. You're leaving already? Bell asks as the Palum stands up before looking down at the valis she had placed on the counter. And I said it was my treat tonight. Lily doesn't want to impose more than she has right now, Lily said. Besides. Slam. Lily nearly jumps when the owner of the pub, Mia was her name if she recalled correctly, slammed a plate of huge steak in front of Bell. The Palum had thought the counter would have collapsed due to how hard the dwarf woman had slammed the plate down. Lily believes you will need it, Lily finished saying. Bell looked down at the plate in front of him before looking up at Mia and said, I didn't order this. What are you talking about, Mr. Knight? Seer told me you ordered this, so here you go. Eat up. As soon as the dwarven woman had finished saying that, did she then slam down another mug of ale next to the plate. That was Bell's sixth mug if Lily was keeping track correctly. In that case, slowly looking away from the dish forced upon him, Bell turned to Lily and said, Have a good night, Lily. Lily blinked in surprise at that before a bashful blush made its way to the Palum's face. Yes. Have a good night as well, Master Bell. The knight nodded at her before he turned his attention back to the big plate of steak in front of him and got to work cutting it down with a knife. Lily took that as her cue to leave. To the side of the front entrance where other adventurers' gears were being kept in check, Lily grabbed her things before leaving the pub. Once outside, did the small girl sigh to herself again as she cancelled out her magic, getting rid of her dog ears and tail. Really, that Master Bell is hopeless, Lily said to herself, running a hand through her now dog-earless hair as she made her way home. Well, she said home, but it was more of a safe house to her really. She didn't trust staying at the Soma Familia home, and spending money at inns was counterproductive to what she was trying to accomplish. Have a good night, Lily. Lily found herself pausing as those words spoken from the knight echoed in her head. When was the last time she had those words spoken to her? Lily honestly couldn't remember, but somehow those simple words, they were nice. She liked the way they sounded, more than she thought she would. Just what is going on with me? Lily thought to herself, adjusting the huge bag she was carrying before she remembered something and dug into her coat pocket. She then took out a familiar-looking ring, the same ring Bell had found during the quest that took them outside of the city. The same one the knight had dug out from a literal pile of shit, only now it was cleaned up. To a common civilian, the ring may have looked normal, if not a bit extravagant due to the way the ruby gem embedded in the ring looked. But if one tried on the ring, they would soon find out that it was no normal ring, but a magic item. As the name implies, magic items were items imbued with magic or magic-like properties. A few examples would be salamander wool, cloth imbued with a salamander spirit's power, and undine cloth, cloth imbued by the powers of an undine spirit. The former had the ability to protect its wearer against fire-based attacks and the cold, while the latter does the exact opposite with the added bonus of enabling a user to swim better in water and reduces water resistance and water pressure. The ring in Lily's hands, according to Bell, simply increased one's health. The Palom herself, while reluctant due to where the ring was found, tried the ring on to see what the night had meant and felt the results instantly. Now it wasn't that Lily wasn't healthy, she was perfectly fine. It's just that by wearing the ring it was like there was more energy inside of the girl. It was very hard to describe due to feeling like this for the first time, but Belle decided to call it a life ring due to its effects. Somehow, Lily thought the name fitted the magical accessory. And that guy just went and gave this to Lily. Lily thought to herself, holding the ring up to the sky until it was under the moon. Inside the head of the Palom, the small girl was debating whether to sell the ring or not. Due to its magical properties, she could get some good cash out of this. But then again, the knight went and gave this to her, saying it would help during today's dungeon diving. Wait! Lily stops walking, pausing to herself. Was she really hesitating in selling this ring? This same ring which had been found in a literal pile of shit. Shit that came from monsters, goblins might she add. Why the heck was she even thinking about this? I'll. Lily began shaking the damn thing in her hands before she raised it up, and proceeded to put it back in her pocket. I'll just take this to Cornwall later. Lily thought to herself as she continued walking, confused with herself. This has never happened to her before. She knows full well that this ring could sell for quite the amount of cash which would bring her one step closer to her goal. Why was she so hesitant about sealing it? Belle was the one who gave it to her so she could do whatever she wanted with it. Yeah, it was hers now, not Belle's. He found it himself, cleaned up it, and yet he gave it to her. So really, why was she? Lily stopped walking, pausing once again as a thought ran through her mind as if she just received a revelation. Am I growing attached to that guy? And when she meant by that guy, she meant her current employer, Bell Cranel. No way. That's no way that's true. Lily screamed in her mind. There was just no way she was actually growing attached to that strange adventurer. Sure, he may have treated her more nicely than others, always shared half of their entire profit with her, treated her to nice food when others would leave her starving on the street, and brought her outside of the city where she witnessed just how beautiful the outside world is. Lily had to slap herself in order to stop her train of thought from going any further. By the gods in heaven, it was worse than she thought. God damn it. Screw it. Taking out the ring again, Lily gave the small item a determined look before she went and changed directions. Her destination now set towards Cornwall's shop. She was going to sell this thing to the gnome and prove to herself that she wasn't growing attached to that stupid and arguably nice adventurer. Damn it, she was doing it again. Focus, Lily Arde. Just sell the ring, collect the money, and go back home and have a nice, long sleep. Lily mutters to herself as she navigates through the alleyways. The gnome's shop wasn't too far away from her home, so it shouldn't take her too long to sell the ring and get back home. Then, once she was fully well-rested, she'll meet up with Belle and Sif tomorrow and continue on just like every other day. Heck, maybe the knight would take her out of the city to go on another quest like last time. Well. Lily snaps out of her thoughts and freezes up, eyes widening in horror at who she had run into. It was a small group of men, just 3 people in total, as the one leading the group was a slightly chubby, short middle-aged man with red-brown hair and yellow eyes along with raccoon ears and tail. Fancy running into you here, little Miss Supporter. Canoe smiled wickedly, as did the rest of his group as they began to surround her. Lily already knew what they were about to do. Canoe and his group were adventurers from the same familia as her, the Soma familia, who would come around regularly and take whatever she had that was worth something. They did this in order to collect enough funds to taste the grand prize of the familia, wine made by the familia's god himself. She could have run, but they would have caught her before she got far. The only thing she could really do was grin and bear it like she's always done. They could beat her up all they want, they wouldn't break her. After all, you can't break what's already broken. We were just on our way to visit you, but this works out perfectly, Canoe said as he got a little too close for her comfort. She tried to back away, but the raccoon man grabbed her by her coat and pulled her close to his face. She was really tempted to punch it, but she knew that would only result in a more severe beating, so she held back. Though she wished the man's breath didn't smell of booze. Then again, she just had a mug of ale earlier, so she really wasn't one to talk. Tell me something, Canoe said, smirking deviously. You're friends with that armored adventurer, right? Lily thought they would have pinned her down and just take her stuff like they always did. She certainly didn't expect that. What do you mean? Lily said, her voice cracking a little, which surprised her. There's no way they were talking about Bell, right? It's not like he was the only adventurer walking around in full-body armor. You know, the one with the wolf. There was a certain glint in the raccoon man's eyes when he mentioned the wolf, no doubt talking about Sif. Lily didn't like it. She didn't like it one bit, and she certainly didn't like what she was told next. Hestia sat by herself on the old sofa that doubled as Belle's bed. She had already eaten her dinner, some leftover Jagamarakuin that consisted of prototype flavors the shop had been working on, and a glass of milk. After brushing her teeth and changing into her pajamas, Hestia should already be in bed by now, but instead chose to wait for her child to come home. Not only did she have to tell him about meeting with Loki, but also discuss his current status. He sure is late though, Hestia thought to herself, bring her knees up to her chest as she patiently waited for her child and his wolf companion. To keep herself from being bored, she had been reading a book she had borrowed from Mayak. Said book was currently placed to the side and had been left there. Hestia couldn't focus, too restless. How do I even ask him about this? Hestia thought, looking down at her child's status sheet laid down on the table in front of her. Just looking at it made her even more nervous. What should she say? And what would her child tell her? She was scared to find out, provided her child would even tell her the truth. Of course, as a goddess, even with her powers sealed away, no mortal could tell a lie to her, for she would know instantly. Clack, clack, clack. She heard the sound of metal clacking against metal way before she heard the sound of the door opening. Her child was finally back, and that made the nervousness inside of her even worse. Forget butterflies in your stomach. It felt like she had bees buzzing around in hers. Walking down the stairs, both Bell and Sif appeared before her as the former spoke. I'm home. Putting on her best smile, Hestia stood up from the sofa and faced her blessed child. Welcome back, Bell. You too, Sif. The wolf gave the goddess a snort as it went and placed down a bag on the table. Judging from the smell of food inside, the two must have gone to that pub Bell once talked about and brought back leftovers. Have you eaten yet? I brought back leftovers, Bell said while in the process of taking off his helmet. So the leftovers were for her? How nice of her child to do that. She really was blessed to have such a kind soul as part of her familia. Still, don't know how I feel about this one though, Hestia thought to herself as she glanced over at Sif, who was already in the process of making her bed, preparing to turn in for the night. Of course, calling the wolf's bed a bed was a bit of a long stretch. It was makeshift at best, made by Bell himself, who used a combination of hay and spare sheets and pillows the young man had bought a week ago. It would have been a simple matter of buying a dog bed for the wolf, but considering her size it would have been futile. Seriously, just what kind of monster was this wolf? Focus, Hestia. Don't get distracted now, Hestia thought to herself, berating herself for getting off topic as she turned back to Bell, who was already halfway through of taking off his armor and hanging the pieces on the mannequin where they would await their wearer to be put back one for another day. The goddess took a glance at the status sheet on the table before taking a deep breath. It was now or never. Bell. In the process of taking off his greaves, the white-haired young man looked up at her. It was only times like these where Hestia got the chance to see her child's face, when it wasn't hidden under that helmet. With his white hair and red eyes, he was like a rabbit. We need to talk, Hestia said, sitting down and gripping her pajama pants. About what? Her child asks, raising an eyebrow. Well, Hestia spared a glance at the paper on the table again before looking back at Bell. I got a visit from Loki this afternoon. Loki? A look of confusion made its way to Bell's face, no doubt recognizing the name of the one who is in charge of one of Arario's most powerful familia. Yeah, she wanted to know about that Chester guy who gave you that armor. Chester? Why does one of Arario's most influential goddesses want to know about him? Well, besides the fact this Chester guy is going around using her familia's emblem, he's also supposedly using the name of one of her late children, Hestia explained. She's been going around all over Arario to find any info about this guy with no luck. So she came to me for any information and I told her about you. I see, Bell said, humming in thought. Is it a problem for you to meet with Loki? Hestia asked. She had been told her child had gotten into a fight with one of Loki's children once before and wondered if meeting the goddess would be awkward. Her child then shook his head as he finally took off his greaves and placed to the side. It is no problem. If the goddess Loki wishes to speak with me about Chester, then I see no problem with meeting her. I'll meet with her before I head into the dungeon. I see. That's good, Hestia said. She was still reluctant to have her child meet her arch-nemesis, but the goddess had seen for herself how important this was for Loki. So just this once, she'd set aside her feeling in order to help a fellow goddess. Still didn't mean she wasn't miffed about this. Is there something else you wish to speak to me about? Bell suddenly asks, making Hestia jump in surprise. How did he dash? Just as Hestia wondered how her child knew, she saw him not looking at her, but at the sheet on the table. He must have put two and two together. Just when had her child gotten so sharp? Just as Hestia was about to reach for the status sheet, it was suddenly snatched away from her by none other than Sif, having grabbed the paper with her mouth and brought it over to Bell. Hey, give that back, Hestia exclaims, but it was already too late. Taking the sheet from the wolf, Bell read what was on it and soon, his passive face morphs into one of confusion. Hestia. Normally, Hearing her name coming from the mouth of her child would have made the goddess happy. But as she stared at the unnerving passive expression on Belle's face, Hestia felt the courage she had been trying to build up fade away. Holding up the status sheet, Belle asks, "What is this?" Gulping down her building nervousness, Hestia tried to recollect any courage she could manage and spoke. "Your stars." She managed to get only 2 words out, but it was better than nothing. Belle doesn't say anything in response to Hestia's answer. He just goes back to looking at his status sheet, looking at his current level, stats, and skill for the first time. Meanwhile, Hestia starts to fidget nervously, wondering what her child would say to her. But after a few minutes of waiting, nothing came. The white-haired adventurer just kept on looking at his status sheet, his expression passive and unchanging. While this worried Hestia greatly, it gave her the chance to calm her nerves, gather back the rest of her courage, and break the silence. "Belle?" As if he had been in a trance, Belle blinked before looking up at her. Finally, he spoke to her. "Hestia, when was this?" Pointing to the sheet in his hands, Belle was asking when had his status been like this and how long. The goddess answered with honesty. "When you came back on the day you encountered that Minotaur." "I see." Belle looked back down at the paper in his hands. Before he went into deep thought, Hestia quickly spoke up. "Belle?" said man looked up at his goddess as Hestia wasted no time in asking what she wanted to ask. "This jump in your status, it's unbelievable, impossible even. You were an LV1 just a few weeks ago until that Minotaur encounter you told me about. Belle? Is there something you're hiding from me?" She looked straight into the eyes of her blessed child, waiting for an answer she might not want to even hear about. "I guess I can't just say it's nothing, can I?" Belle asked, and Hestia shook her head, already knowing that such words were a lie even without her powers as a goddess. Sighing as if resigning himself, Belle, who looked no older 16, suddenly appeared much older to Hestia's eyes. It wasn't his appearance that changed, but rather the way he held himself that made him seem older. Then, Belle went and reached his hand behind his neck and touched a small, circle-shaped scar Hestia had noticed a few weeks back, but dismissed it as an injury her child had received down in the dungeon. Oh, how wrong she was. The second Belle's fingers touched the scar did his whole appearance change. His lips turned slightly blue and his eyes turned sunken. But that was only the beginning as Belle's skin started to shrivel up like meat being left out in the sun for too long. It soon turned worse when Belle's skin, which had been quite pale, started to gain color to the point it looked burnt. No, it was burnt. His entire skin was burnt. By the heavens above, his entire body looked like he had been dipped into a pot of fire and was just left in there for who knows how long. And even them, such burns somehow failed to hide the scars. By the gods and goddess still up in the upper world, they were everywhere. Even with the black shirt and pants covering most of his body, and his socks covering his feet, Hestia could clearly see the scars decorating his hands and face. The palm of his hands, his fingers, the ears, nose, no part of his body had been left untouched. She could even make out one across his neck and was scared to know what laid hidden underneath his clothes. The only thing that remained the same was Belle's white hair, but that didn't help one bit as Hestia raised a hand to her mouth, feeling nauseous just looking at what her child had become. Even Sif herself looked surprised as the wolf had stepped back in shock. By the time Belle was done transforming, what sat in front of the goddess was what could only be described as a burnt corpse covered literally head to toe in scars. "Not a pretty picture, huh?" Belle sarcastically said with a bitter smile. "Belle? What is?" Hestia couldn't find the words to describe what she was feeling, nor did she have the ability to, too shocked at what she was seeing. What in the world had happened to her child? "You wanted to know what I was hiding. Well, here it is," Belle said, gesturing to his new appearance. "Belle, what happened to you?" Hestia managed to speak the one thought that was plaguing her mind right now. Even then, she was afraid of what she would hear. "What happened to me?" Belle repeated, looking down at himself and taking a moment as if trying to steel himself for what he was about to say. He looked like he was about to break down crying, Hestia noted. But then, suddenly, Sif walked up to Belle, surprising the undead as the wolf raised her nose to Belle's left hand. The hand she had bitten when they had first met, and sniffed it. After doing that, did the wolf look at Belle, staring into her master's sunken eyes before she went and sat right next to him, unafraid and refusing to move. This single act alone caused Belle to smile, as he placed his left hand on the wolf's head, and proceeded to stroke her as if silently thanking the wolf. "You ask me what happened," Belle said as he turned back to Hestia. "Where do I even begin?" With a grim look on his face, Belle told Hestia everything. He told her of what he is. He told her of his escape from the Undead Asylum. He told her of his journey through Lordran. He told her of the people and teachers he befriended and learned from. He told her of the covenants he joined and worked under. He told her of the many enemies he made. He told her of the people who killed and backstabbed him. He told her of the many creatures, abominations, knights, demons, dragons, and gods he fought against. He told her of the many times he's been killed only to come back alive soon after. He told her of his quest, his mission to link the first flame. He told her everything. Hestia sat there, looking on and listening in awe and horror as she was told the story of Bell, the chosen undead. And like she thought, she didn't like what she learned. Chapter 9. Grace 9, Trust. The sound of clothes and gear moving was all that was heard in the tiny underground room that acted as the home for the Hestia Familia, as one Bell Cranel finished fastening the last of his equipment before grabbing his ever-so-important helmet. Putting it on, the undead once again hid his face from the world around him as he made sure to tighten the strap of his helmet so that the piece of equipment wouldn't fall off. Once he was done with that, did he look down to see Sif ready herself, ready to aid him as always. Smiling under his helmet, he reaches down and strokes the wolf's head, getting a cute but quiet cry from the canine monster. Standing back up, Bell then turns towards Hestia, who was still in bed. "I'm off." Hestia barely gives a response back, barely moving in her bed. "I'll inform your boss that you can't come to work today," Bell said, and again, Hestia Bear gives a response back. Having said all he needed to say, Bell and Sif take their leave for the day. Once they were gone though, did Hestia slowly get up, slightly tired as her eyes were red from crying. Looking towards where Bell left, Hestia felt more tears threatening to break out. "Bell." Hestia covers her eyes, trying to stop the tears from falling as she recalls what her child had told her last night. "Last night, when I came to, I was in a prison." The undead began his tale, all the while stroking Sif's head as he spoke to the goddess sitting in front of him. "I don't know how I got there nor why. It was only after spending a year in that damned asylum did I later learn that I was cursed." "Cursed?" Hestia repeated, confused. In response, Bell pointed to the circle-shaped scar on his neck which glowed faintly like embers from a fire. "The dark sign, triggered by death. Those branded by this mark are reborn after death and become what is known as an undead." Undead. Already Hestia did not like the sound of that. "So, what? Are you some sort of zombie or something?" Because looking at her child's current form, he certainly fit the bill to some extent. "Basically," said Undead shrugs. "I didn't want to believe it at first, denied it with every fiber of my being. But as the years went on by, deprived of food and water to the point where the most delicious thing I've eaten there was the dirt on the ground, I was forced to come to facts that I was no longer human when my body changed into what you see now, minus the scars of course." Hestia found herself speechless at what was just the beginning of Bell's tale, already horrified. And much to her displeasure, Bell took her silence as a go-ahead to continue. "I don't know how long I was trapped in that prison. I lost track of the time, and somewhere down the line, I had stopped caring. All I know is that when I finally got out of there, I was an adult. Of course, that was only after Bell got some humanities to use so that he didn't look like a shriveled-up corpse and saw what he looked like." "An adult?" Hestia raised an eyebrow at that. "But you're... I don't know why is it that I look no older than 16, but believe me when I say that I was much taller than what I am now," Bell said, honestly confused as to why he had de-aged. "Okay. But how did you escape that?" "Undead Asylum," Bell helped finish for Hestia before continuing. "I had help." At this did Bell suddenly smile, as if recalling an old fond memory, except he was doing just that, Hestia noted. Hestia also noticed that the smile seemed somewhat sad. "I was just sitting in the corner of my cell like I always did, minding my own business when suddenly, from out of nowhere, a body fell in from the roof. Surprised, I looked up to see a knight through a hole he made." "So this knight was the one who helped you escape?" Hestia asked. "In a way," Bell said, suddenly appearing sheepish as he scratched his cheek. "Shortly after dropping the body into my cell did the knight just take his leave. I was confused understandably when I noticed that the body had a set of keys on him, keys that would open the cell I was in." "So wait," Hestia spoke up, realizing what Bell was saying. "He just dropped a body into your cell containing the keys to your freedom and just left? He just left you on your own to fend for yourself?" "Basically, yeah," Bell said, having no reason to refute the goddess' claim for they were true. "Of course, I didn't really care that he didn't help me or not, as I was more focused on the fact that I finally had a way out. So I grabbed the keys, took the armor the body was wearing, and finally—" "Hold it!" Hestia held up a hand, stopping Bell. "Did you just say you took the armor off from a dead guy?" "I had outgrown the clothes I wore long ago. I was practically naked when I was finally out of that damn cell," Bell said, giving Hestia an image she would most likely dream about during any other time than this. "Anyway, I made my way out of the asylum, though it wasn't easy. There were undead soldiers who had turned hollow and traps everywhere. Not to mention there was a literal demon guarding the exit." "A what now?" Hestia spoke up in disbelief. "A demon," Bell repeated. "It was big, fat, ugly, and the only thing standing in the way between me and freedom. Of course, the first time I fought the giant monster, I was heavily outmatched as the armor I took barely withstood one strike from the thing. So I ran from it, exploring more of the asylum where I obtained better equipment to defend myself. It was only after triggering a trap did I then meet the person who helped me escape. His name was Oscar of Astora. Once again, Bell smiles sadly when he spoke the knight's name. He was an undead like me, though he was at the asylum for a different reason, to fulfill a prophecy. A prophecy? Hestia raised an eyebrow, interested in what this prophecy could be. Thou who art undead art chosen, in thine exodus from the undead asylum, mocketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords. When thou ringeth the bell of awakening, the fate of the undead thou shalt know. Bell perfectly quoted what Oscar had told him that day word for word. It was an old saying in his family and the reason why he was at the asylum. He believed that if he could escape from there, he'd be the so-called chosen undead. Chosen undead, Hestia muttered, remembering one of Bell's skills having that name. Having seen his status sheet, Bell knew this too and continued to explain. Oscar always said he was searching for a purpose. It was the one driving force that pushed him to do, well, anything. I do not know how he ended up at the Undead Asylum, but even then, he wasn't confident that he could fulfill the prophecy himself. So he started releasing undeads out from their cell, such as he did with me, in the hopes of at least one of them could fulfill the prophecy. But as it turns out, we both escaped from there. The both of you? Hestia said, surprised. From the way Bell was speaking, she was under the impression that Bell was the only one who had escaped from the asylum. I found him lying against the wall, injured and dying. Bell continued as he went and grabbed his ever-trusty Estus flask and showed it to the goddess. He gave me this in the hopes that I would carry on for him. But, Hestia repeated, wanting to know what happened next. Despite not meaning to aid me as he did, he was still the one who helped me escape my prison. I could not just leave him there, dying, Bell said as he lightly shook the flask in his hand. So I used the very Estus he gave me to heal him, and we both worked together to take down the demon guarding the exit. And you both escaped, Hestia said, smiling and relieved. To hear her child going through such a thing and escaping made her sigh out in relief. The two of us escaping together greatly confused Oscar since only one undead was to escape the asylum. But I could care less. I was free. I dare say that that was the happiest moment of my life, Bell said, smiling happily as he recalled the memory. Said smile soon dropped as he said, but sadly, that was only the beginning. Eh? Hestia blinked, almost jumping in surprise. There was more? Hearing what had happened to Bell was already hard enough. Just what more was there to add? In my joy, I had forgotten about the prophecy Oscar had spoken of, Bell said before quoting. In thine exodus from the undead asylum mocketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords. I escaped the undead asylum, and was brought to those very lands, the land of ancient lords Lordran. Lordran? Hestia repeated the name, confused. I've never heard of such a place. Neither had I. When I arrived there, I couldn't help but think I had either gone back in time or was in a different world altogether. The technology there was very old, as there wasn't a single use of a magic stone incorporated into anything. When I spoke to the people there, those that could and would talk to me, they had told me that they hadn't an inkling of terms such as the dungeon or Orario. Not only that, but the land itself had gone to hell, for a lack of a better phrase. Most of the land was in ruin and all manner of beasts and monsters crawled the once great kingdom. I spent many years there, and I can confidently say that I would rather die than return to such a place. It sounds like a horrible place, Hestia said. It was, Bell stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Not like Hestia could argue with anything Bell said so far. Oscar and I arrived at a place known as Firelink Shrine. Possibly the only safe place in all of Lordran. The only safe place? Hestia repeated, finding it hard to believe that there was only a single place in an entire kingdom that was considered safe. There have been a few incidents there, but Firelink Shrine, to me, was truly the only place where I felt safe, Bell said. Once I arrived at the Land of Lords did Oscar and I went our separate ways, off to ring the bells of awakening. Wait, bells? As in plural, Hestia said, catching that small detail. Yes, Bell nodded. Another resident of the shrine told me how the prophecy Oscar had spoken of was nothing more than a hoax. There were others before me and Oscar who came to Lordran following the same tale. He was also the one who told me that there were actually 2 bells of awakening that needed to be rung. And getting to those bells was not easy. Somehow, Hestia could tell that Bell was putting it mildly. So she asked, what happened? I died. She just didn't expect that answer. What? I died, Bell repeated. After I went my separate ways with Oscar and was informed by that crestfallen warrior, did I set out towards one of the bells of awakening. As I had no idea when or where I was, I figured following the prophecy Oscar spoke of, fake or not, would at least yield me some answers. But getting to the bells themselves proved to be the hardest part of my quest. Death. It came in all forms, and Bell had the displeasure of experiencing most of it. Stabbed by either sword, spears, and/or knives. Shot by arrows. Ambushed by skeletons where he was cut to pieces or run over. Hestia gave Bell a look of disbelief when told that a skeleton lodged into a wheel was what ran him over. Crushed by enemies standing taller than him. Being burned alive by those that threw fire at him or falling into pools of lava. Drowning in poisonous swamps or to poison itself. Eaten alive by horrific monsters disguised as treasure chests. Hestia found that to be the most terrifying. Cut or beaten down by those more powerful than him. Electrocuted to death by those able to use lightning. Cursed to the point where his body just gave out. Blasted away by spellcasters, humongous giants, and dragons alike. Falling off from great heights which resulted in his death. Bell was embarrassed to admit that he died the most this way. The list went on, and Hestia grew more sick the more she listened. I once caught an infectious disease which made my head all bloated. It was a very nasty experience. Bell. Finally, Hestia couldn't take it anymore and leaped from her seat, forcing Bell to quickly catch her as she hugged the chosen undead while bawling her eyes out. Hestia, please calm down, Bell said, trying to calm down the crying goddess. How could she be calm? Her child, her precious Bell, had died so many times. Sure, he later revived thanks to a bonfire of all things. She's still trying to wrap her head around that. But the fact still remained her child had to suffer a literal cycle of death and rebirth, and she wasn't there to comfort him. The shock of actually dying must have been so much for Bell, and she hadn't been there for him. Hestia, slowly moving her arms off and away from him, Bell faced Hestia eye to eye. I think we should stop for tonight. What? No, Hestia immediately protested. She wanted to know, had to know more about what had happened to her precious child. Hestia, Bell exclaims, nearly shouting out her name, which made the goddess jump up in surprise. Calming down, he gently held her hands and said, "You're shaking." Blinking in confusion, Hestia looked down at herself and saw that her hands were shaking. And it wasn't just her hands. Her entire body was shaking. "I have barely told you my experience and you're already shaking this much," Bell said, his tone filled with worry. "Get some sleep. It's late and you have work tomorrow." As if I can worry about work after hearing what you told me, Hestia thought to herself. But Bell's eyes told her that there was no room for argument. So she sighed and got up where she was guided to her bed by Bell. She was still shaken, but that didn't mean she wouldn't keel over. Nevertheless, she appreciated the thought as she slipped in her bed and pulled the sheet up to her head. "Good night, Hestia," Bell said as he moved to go turn off the lights, but was stopped when Hestia grabbed his sleeve. "Bell," said Undead, turned towards the goddess. With a blush on her face, Hestia asks, "Can you sleep with me?" The undead raised a hairless eyebrow at that. "Don't give me that look. After what you told me, I'm afraid that you'll disappear," is what she wanted to say. After what she had been told so far, she feared that when she woke up the next morning, Bell would be gone. As if realizing this, Bell went and placed 2 fingers on his brand. In a matter of seconds, his shriveled-up appearance turned back to what it was before, making him appear human again. After doing this, did Bell give her a reassuring smile. "Do not worry, Hestia. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here by your side," he said as he moves back and leans against the wall. "But you need to sleep too," Hestia said, clearly wanting the undead near her. "No, I don't." "Huh?" Scratching his cheek sheepishly, Bell said, "I do not require sleep, or rather, I am unable to sleep at all." "Huh?" Present. She had watched him. All night long. Hestia had watched Bell, who stayed up all night long watching over her, and Sif, who had turned in for the night after she got into bed. She watched all night long, crying all the while, as Bell kept watch over them while keeping himself busy. Apparently, he knew how to wood carve, having made very good wooden carvings of a lion, a wasp, a hawk, and a wolf overnight. Said carvings were currently on the table right now. But those didn't matter. What mattered was how Bell stayed up all night long and didn't look the least bit tired. He truly didn't require any sleep at all. She didn't know when she had fallen asleep, but when she had woken up, Bell was already putting on his equipment alongside Sif. Having died and resurrected who knows how many times, as well as being unable to sleep like a normal person. Once again, more tears threatened to spill out from her eyes. Only this time she was unable to stop them even as she covered her eyes. Oh, Bell. Why did such a thing have to happen to her precious child? Despite having been told what was only the beginning of Bell's entire experience, she could already see that whatever had happened to him had destroyed the once pure and innocent boy she loved. And worst of all, because of the fact that what she was told was only the beginning meant that there was still more to his story. Hestia laid back in her bed and cried herself sleep, her thoughts filled with worry for one Bell Cranel. With Bell. After informing Hestia's boss of her inability to come to work today and visiting the hostess of fertility to pick up his lunch for the day, which he planned to give to Sif later, though he wondered why all the waitresses including Mia gave him weird looks, the knight and his wolf companion walked together until they arrived at their destination. So, this is the Twilight Manor, home to the famous Loki familia. The voice in Bell's head spoke as he and Sif looked at the huge structure which had been built on a small area of land. Multiple tall towers overlap and support each other, with the middle tower being the tallest, all connected to a castle-like mansion. With how the buildings were structured plus with the red roofs, Bell couldn't help but think the entire structure had been carved out from flames, though they had nothing on Londo. Lowering his head away from the impressive buildings, Bell looks ahead and sees a few guards, no doubt Loki familia members, guarding the gates to the manor. "Stay close to me," Bell said to Sif, who nodded as the two made their way to the gates. "Halt!" They were immediately spotted as one of the guards, a human with brown hair, told them to stop, which they did. "Who are you? Is that a monster?" the other guard said, pointing at Sif, who merely narrowed her eyes back at the guard, easily identified as a cat person due to the ears on the man's head. Noticing the monster, the human guard narrowed his eyes in suspicion at Bell, readying a spear with his partner doing the same. "What is your business here?" "I am here to see your goddess." Bell got down to business quickly, his left hand ready to bring up his shield to defend against any possible attacks while he flexed the fingers of his right hand, ready to draw his sword and defend himself if he had to. "Tell Loki that a Bell Cranel is here to see her." Still staring at the knight in suspicion, the human guard motioned for the cat guard to go inform their goddess, leaving just the three of them together. The fact that the guard was okay with sending off his friend told Bell that he must be at least a LV2 adventurer. Of course, with the knowledge of his actual level, such a thing wouldn't matter against someone like Bell. Nevertheless, the undead chose to remain quiet as to not provoke the guard. Not a single word came from Bell nor a cry from Sif as the former stood perfectly still while the latter simply sat down, both of them completely silent. In contrast, the guard was clearly tensed, cautious of the two in front of him as he tightened his grip on his spear. Finally, after about a couple of minutes, the cat guard came back and whispered something into the other guard's ear. Soon after did the guard lower his spear and the two of them opened the gates. "Please follow me," the cat guard said, motioning Bell to follow, which he did as Bell and Sif followed the guard onto Loki familia grounds. Clack, clack, clack. Bell's armor clanked as he moved, his steps bold and confident as the noise his armor made was starting to attract attention from nearby Loki familia members who were all outside either training or checking supplies and equipment. "Hey, who's that? Never seen him before. What's with his armor? It's so dirty. That's a big wolf next to him. Is it a monster?" Some members whispered to one another while others simply silently watched him. Bell didn't let the stares and whispers bother him as he was brought to the main building and entered a sort of lobby room. To his left and right were a set of stairs that lead upstairs to a row of rooms and further up, no doubt to house the many members that made up the familia. Across the hall were doors that lead to the dining room, the faint scent of food cluing him on this as the sound of chatter informed him that there were still people eating their breakfast. Chandeliers hanged up above situated right in the center of the building, meaning somewhere around the 3rd to 4th floors. All in all, the place was huge and slightly fancy. Had Bell not been acquainted with places such as Londo and the Duke's archives, he would have been both intimidated and in awe. "Loki is currently busy dealing with some business, so please wait here," the cat guard said, and Bell nodded. With that, the guard took his leave, leaving Bell and Sif all alone. Silence soon descended upon the two as Bell gave a few curious looks around the place before he went over to a nearby couch, no doubt used for waiting visitors, and sat down. Sif walked over, sat down and rested her head on Bell's legs, closing her eyes to nap as she had lost interest in their surroundings. Bell placed his gloved left hand on Sif's head and gently stroked the wolf, getting a blissful moan from the canine as the two sat in silence. "Bell?" Suddenly, hearing his name, Bell turns to his right and sees upon the stairs was the blonde sword princess, dressed in her casual clothes with her hair tied into a ponytail and carrying her sword which was strapped to a belt around her waist. "Miss Ace, good morning." The knight went and greeted the swordswoman. Sif opened one of her eyes and looked up towards the blonde before closing it a second after. "Gee, good morning," Ace greeted back, having not expected to see the armored adventurer first thing in the morning. As she walks down the stairs, she asks, "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to speak with your goddess." "Loki?" Bell nods. "For what?" "It seems Loki wants some information that only I have," Bell said, his answer a bit vague. "Sif and I are just waiting for your goddess to finish whatever business she is dealing with currently." "I see," Ace said. "In that case." The swordswoman then ran back upstairs, leaving Bell and Sif alone once again for about a minute until she came running back, carrying a familiar-looking gauntlet. Here, Ace said, presenting the gauntlet to the knight. This is yours, right? Yes, Bell nodded, taking back his missing gauntlet, slipping it on and completing his look. Of course, with how grimy the rest of his armor was, the gauntlet stuck up as being the only piece of equipment that looked properly clean. I made sure to properly clean it every night, Ace said awkwardly, trying to start up a conversation but could only come up with that. In her mind, she was berating herself for sounding weird. Thank you, Bell said, his tone sincere, for holding on to it until now, and for maintaining it. It was nothing, Ace said, looking away to hide a small blush forming on her face, having been caught off guard by Bell's genuine gratitude. She didn't think she did that much. She simply held onto the piece of equipment knowing it was his. Still, she felt happy nonetheless. She wondered why, though. Heya! Suddenly, appearing from another door came the one and only head of Familia, Loki, waving at the two as she walked over to them. Sorry for the wait, didn't mean to take so long. And good morning to you, my lovely Ace. Morning, Loki. Ace greeted her goddess back casually, completely ignoring Loki's attempt at flirting. She then turned back to Bell, bowed, and then left to go get breakfast. Ehehe, as cute as always, Loki commented, smiling at the blonde swordswoman before turning to her guests. So you're the brat's child, huh? Bell Cranel. Bell got up, introducing himself before gesturing to Sif by his side. This is my friend, Sif. I know about you, Loki said. I was at the pub that night when you socked Bet right in the face. Who? Bet? Loki repeated, yet the knight simply tilted his head in confusion. You know, the werewolf? Oh, the chosen undead slammed his fist down on an open palm, realizing who Loki was talking about. That guy. You seriously didn't know who you punched? Loki asked, surprised as her little Fenrir was quite famous/infamous as was most of her children. I never got his name, Bell said, shrugging. Oh, Bet is going to be pissed, Loki thought, knowing that the werewolf has been holding a grudge for what happened that night. If her eyes weren't seemingly closed most of the time, Loki would have blinked as she suddenly recognized something about the knight in front of her, or rather the fact he had a wolf by his side. A knight traveling around with a wolf by his side. Loki hummed to herself, looking at both Bell and Wolf together. I see. So you're that wolf knight that's been getting pretty popular recently. Bell titled his head in confusion, with Sif doing the same. Wolf Knight. You don't know? Word's been going around about a knight with a wolf by his side going around and helping people around the areas of Orario, Loki explained, looking at Bell's armor from top to bottom. Never thought it'd be Hestia's kid though. Heh, small world. You wish to know about Marvelous Chester, did you not? Bell asked, bringing the topic back to why he was here in the first place. At the mention of Chester's name did Loki's expression turn serious, losing the smile she had been sporting since showing up. Follow me. The goddess motions for the knight to follow her. There are some people who want to know what you know too, not just me. Not saying anything, Bell and Sif followed the Tricker Goddess down the halls of her home base, passing by more Familia members who gave the armored adventurer and his companion curious and confused looks. Some even cried out in surprise at the sight of Sif, a monster who was basically roaming around freely in a Familia home base. This, of course, ignited some whispers between members, but Bell drowned them all out as Loki led him into what is obviously an office, as the desk filled with papers and bookshelves surrounding the room was a dead giveaway. Stepping inside, Bell saw that there were already people here. The first he noticed was a tall high elf. The longer than normal elf ears told him as much, with jade-colored hair tied in a tail that reaches to her waist and the same colored eyes. She wears a green outfit with yellow borders, a white cloak over it, a black belt, a yellow sash, black leggings, and long brown boots. Bell immediately recognizes this person to be the elf from during his previous meeting with Ace back in the dungeon. The next person Bell noticed was a man who could be described as short and a stout wall of muscle. A dwarf the undead quickly identified as the man wears a battlecloth and boots, and has brown eyes and long brown hair along with facial hair of the same color that is long enough to form a beard. The third and last person was a very short, young-looking man that could be mistaken for a child. A Palum Bell quickly identified as the small man stood just under 4 feet tall and sat at the desk, telling Bell that the room belonged to the Palum and was someone of high ranking if he had an office to himself, probably a captain if Bell had to guess. He has medium-length scruffy blonde hair and blue eyes with a fair skin tone. He wears a yellow vest over a purple long-sleeved shirt and trousers. Despite the Palum's small body, Bell knew that he was stronger than he appeared to be. They look important, the voice in his head commented. Bell ignored it as always, but he couldn't help but feel like he should know these people, at least by reputation. Probably more of his younger self's memories that have yet to resurface. Closing the door, Loki went over to the desk and sat down on it as she and everyone else in the room directed their attention towards Bell, who was standing at the center of the room under the gaze of every person here. Loki. The dwarf was the first to speak, pointing at Sif, who stood by Bell's side. Did you just let a monster into the office? It's fine, it seems docile enough. Loki waved off the dwarf's worry, but then turned to Bell and asked, it won't start biting people, right? As long as you don't provoke her. Well, that's reassuring, Loki said sarcastically before gesturing to the people with her. Anyway, before we begin, I might as well introduce you to the three here, though I'm sure you already know who they are. I do not, Bell answered instantly, causing everyone to look at him in surprise. The three looked towards Loki, who shrugged before gesturing them to introduce themselves, silently telling them that Bell was being honest and that he really didn't know who they were. Clearing his voice, the Palum went first. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm captain of the Loki Familia, Findame. Gareth Landrock, nice to meet ya. The dwarf introduced himself next with a nod. I am Reverial Joe's elf. The high elf went last. We met each other in the dungeon the other night. Bell Cranel. Bell introduced himself, bowing before gesturing to Sif. This is Sif. The wolf gave a single bark in response. You named it, Loki asked, raising an eyebrow at that. Her. Excuse me? Bell gestures to Sif again. Sif is a female. Everyone blinks at him at that before looking down at Sif and then going back up at Bell. Loki opened her mouth to speak but then closed it. You know what? I'm not even going to ask how you know that, Loki said as her expression once again turned serious, with the others matching her expression. Bell did the same, though no one would be able to tell due to his helmet hiding his face. That armor you have, Loki began, pointing at the very armor Bell wore. The person who gave that to you, what can you tell us about him? You mean Marvelous Chester? Bell asks. Yeah, that guy, Loki said, seemingly becoming angrier at the mere mention of Chester's name, with the other three having similar reactions. My kids and I have been running around trying to find any clues about this guy, but it's like he doesn't even exist. However, according to the Chibi, it seems you're the only one who knows anything about this marvelous bastard. So tell us, what do you know about the guy? Bell doesn't answer right away. Instead, he was looking at everyone in the room, studying their faces. It seems the mere mention of Chester's name ignited anger from the four people here. But why? Bell thought before speaking. Before I answer you, allow me to ask, why do you wish to know about Chester? If you must know, when you received that armor, this marvelous Chester character was using our Familia emblem, Finn said, gesturing to a nearby banner which depicted the Familia emblem. To use the emblem of a Familia when you're not really a part of them is an illegal act and cannot go unpunished. Plus, Reveria spoke up, the name Chester is the name of a late member of ours, one who has passed away some time ago. A moment of silence descended onto the room once the elf gave Bell that info. From under his helmet, Bell raised an eyebrow at each and every one of them. You don't think Chester is his real name? Bell asked, bring up that point. Sure, he would be the first to admit that Chester was a crafty bastard who cheated him out of his souls by overpricing his products, and his last meeting with the masked stranger was him trying to kill the knight. On second thought, perhaps he should sick the Loki Familia after him. A form of payback, if you will. Chester isn't exactly a common name, Loki said. Plus, we already checked to see if there were anyone else whose name Chester. As we know, the only Chester we know passed away years ago. I see, Bell said, slightly impressed that they didn't jump to conclusions and did some prior investigation. Guess they weren't one of Orario's strongest Familia for nothing. Now then, what can you tell us? Loki asks once again. Of course, we plan to recompensate you for this info, Finn added in. We're willing to give you anything within our power. They really want this info, Bell thought, seeing just how much they wanted to know about Chester. You don't need to give me anything, Bell said before holding up his gauntlet. One of yours, Miss Ace, found my missing gauntlet and returned it to me. I will give you the info you seek to express my thanks. Well, that certainly makes things easier, Finn commented with a small smile. Ah, my precious Ace. Ever so helpful even when you're physically not here. Loki gushed over, blushing and smiling as she thought about the blonde swordswoman. Ignoring the goddess antics, Bell began to speak, holding back and tweaking some info as to leave out the parts like where he basically traveled to the past and the fact that he was an undead, obviously. In truth, I don't know much about him either. It was during my journey to Orario when I first met Chester. He was selling products at an overpriced range, but I was low on supplies and thus had no choice but to buy from him. So he's a merchant, or at least masquerading as one, Finn said. I wouldn't call him a merchant, really. He's fully capable of defending himself, Bell said. He was armed with knives and a crossbow. He also had a sword on him, but I never saw him use it. I wouldn't put it past him to have other items hidden on his person. A crossbow and knives. Loki mutters to herself, though Bell noticed that the redhead looked slightly surprised for some reason. Is that all? Reveria asked. Surely there must be more you can tell us. When was the last you seen him? Gareth asked. That last time I saw him, he was trying to kill me, Bell said, surprising the four. I had just gotten done dealing with some monsters attacking me when he snuck up from behind. He tried to kill me and take my stuff, the arrogant bastard. Even with the mask, I could tell he was smiling mockingly at me. Mask, Finn said, catching the word. Ah, right. While I can't tell you much about Chester since I barely know him, I can tell you what he looks like, Bell offered. That's more than enough, Finn said with a small smile. If they knew what this marvelous Chester looked like, it would increase the efficiency of their search. So, what exactly does this guy look like? Gareth asked, curious as was everyone else. Hold on, Bell said, reaching into his pouches and produced a roll of paper and a pencil. He had been intending to use these to map the dungeon, but still had some paper on him and wouldn't be bothered with discarding one. Walking up to Finn's desk, he unrolled the paper and began to draw, causing the four to lean in order to see just what the knight was drawing. The four pulled back once Bell was done, allowing them to see he drew. Bell wasn't the best drawer, but he wasn't the worst either. He was adequate. On the paper was a slightly cartoonish depiction of a man. He wore a high-collar, black duster coat over what appears to be a suit, with a cape over the shoulders, and a rose clipped to the right side of his breast. He wore equally black pants with multiple belts wrapped around the legs as what appears to be a set of crossbow bolts were tucked away in custom-made holsters. No doubts the bolts were for the crossbow Bell mentioned earlier, as being equipped to the legs was a design that allowed the man to reach for them quickly. A black top hat was worn over his head, leaning down so that it hid the top portion, specifically hiding the eyes of a smiling mask. I'm sorry if my drawing skills are lacking, Bell apologized. Oh no, it's fine. You got most of the important bits down, so just this alone is enough. Loki waved off Bell's apology, picking up the drawing and slightly glaring at it. So this is what the bastard looks like. Will that be all? Bell asks. I don't mean to be rude, but I have a party member waiting for me at the dungeon and… Oh, yeah, Getting off of Finn's desk and standing up, Loki offered out her hand to Bell for a handshake. Thanks, you've really helped us out. I do not think I did much, Bell said, grabbing and shaking the offered hand. But you are welcome, and if you do happen to find Chester, would you mind informing me? He's currently in possession of items that belong to me. Sure thing, we'll let you know when we find the bastard, Loki promised as she awkwardly took her hand back. She was truly grateful for what the knight was able to give them, but knowing that the armored adventurer was the child of Hestia meant she now owed the short goddess. I'm going to have to thank her later, Loki thought. No matter how reluctant Loki felt, she wasn't ungrateful and knew when to repay favors. So who here wants to escort Mr. Knight out of here? Loki asks Finn and the others. Her home base wasn't exactly small, and it was easy for newcomers to get lost in here. You don't need to do that, Bell said. It's a simple matter of retracing my steps. The last guy who said that ended up lost in 2 seconds flat, Loki said, thinking of said newbie who was currently acting as one of the supporters here. I've got this, Finn said, opening a drawer and pulling out a small bell wrapped with a small ribbon and heart. From under his helmet, Bell raised an eyebrow at the item in the Palam's hands as he shook it a few times, letting the bell ring, and as if waiting by the door this whole time, an Amazoness woman burst through the door, surprising the knight and Sif, who had been minding her own business up till now and almost bit the Amazoness on instinct. Did you call, Captain? Said the long-haired woman. Like all Amazonesses, she has chocolate skin and wearing revealing clothes that made Bell question how the woman was able to walk around without feeling bothered. For someone who's worn armor for who knows how many years, seeing such a thing rubbed Bell the wrong way, but he chose not to comment. She's barefooted, the voice in his head pointed out. Looking down, Bell saw that the Amazoness was indeed walking barefooted. It took everything within his power to not comment on it. Tioni, can you please escort our guest here out? Finn asked, putting away the bell he had used while looking rather embarrassed. Leave it to me. The Amazoness, now identified as Tiona, saluted before turning to Bell and Sif, jumping in surprise at the latter. Before the Amazoness could ask questions, Bell said, Sif is a good girl, do not worry, said Wolf, let out a bark in response. Right? Tiona said, not sure what to think as she gestures for the two to follow her. If you'll please follow me. And with that, the only ones left in the room were Loki and her 3 executives. Well, that was certainly informative, Gareth sarcastically said, arms crossed as he sighed, dissatisfied with what little they had been told. It may not have been much, but it's better than nothing, Finn said. At least we now know just what our little copycat looks like. A crossbow and knives. The same weapons as Chester, Reveria said, listing the weapons Bell had said Marvelous Chester used, which had been the same weapons their Chester had used long ago. He even mentioned a sword that was barely used, Gareth added. Their Chester had always been a fighter that preferred to keep his distance. But that didn't mean he wasn't defenseless up close. Quite the opposite, in fact. As the three talked with each other, Loki was busy staring at the drawing that depicted the smiling unknown that was Marvelous Chester. He's wearing a mask, just like Chester, Loki thought to herself as she continued to glare down at the drawing in her hands. Finn. The Palum turns to the goddess. How goes the preparations for our next expedition? Loki asked. I already talked things over with Hephaestus. She said she was okay with us taking the blacksmiths with us so long as we share any and all drop items from the lower floors. In that case, things are going fairly smoothly. With the blacksmiths, we can continue to use our main weapons, eliminating the need to use spares. This will also allow us to carry more magic swords with us. Finn informed the goddess before turning over to Gareth. Gareth, how are the arrangements coming along? I have them all done, said the dwarf. Had to stop at about 30 stores in the city. They're all first-class items and we should be getting them today. All that's left is getting Durandal weapons ready for our main forces. Magic swords and Durandal weapons for everyone. Ha ha ha. Loki laughed both awkwardly and nervously. I knew we'd be spending a lot of money, but geez. Sorry, Loki. Finn apologized to the goddess, but she eaved it off. It's fine. I'm leaving everything up to you, so do what you want. Besides, whenever I'm gambling, I prefer going all in, Loki said with a smile. However, gripping the drawing in her hands until she completely crushed it, Loki's smile dropped as a murderous look appeared on her face. Should you happen to find that marvelous bastard, I want you to bring his sorry ass to me alive. I don't care if he's missing a limb or two. Sweating a little at how angry the goddess was but understood the source of it, Finn could only nod and say, Right, back with Bell. You're that guy from the pub, right? Bell turned to his guide. Tioni Hiriot, she had introduced herself as. Yeah, you are the guy who sent Bet flying that one night, Tioni said, recognizing Bell, or rather his armor. I'm sorry, Bell apologized, causing Tioni to blink in confusion. Why are you apologizing? I mean, he's your friend, right? Bell said. As fellow Loki Familia members, shouldn't it be natural to worry when seeing one of their own hurt? He would certainly be angry if anyone tried to hurt Sif. I wouldn't call Bet a friend, Tioni said, thinking about the werewolf. Why, she certainly didn't get along with the loner from time to time, her twin sister being the one who got into fights with the werewolf more often. She knew that Bet was someone who she could trust as a fellow adventurer. He's a reliable comrade, Tioni decided upon her opinion on the werewolf. Plus, he brought it upon himself picking a fight with you and all. She would not forget the image of the giant knight standing ominously over the knight next to her. All the members that were there that night probably felt the same. Tioni then glanced down towards the bigger-than-average gray wolf walking next to the armored adventurer, having never seen anything like it. If you don't mind me asking, what's with the wolf? Tioni asked. She got the feeling the knight wasn't a tamer of the Ganesha Familia, for the wolf that was obviously a monster had no form of restraints on it to keep it in check. And besides the occasional glances and glares the wolf sent to passing by members, the wolf was quite docile and kept to itself. I saved Sif here from the dungeon about a week ago, Bell said, looking down at Sif, who looked back. Ever since then, she has been a reliable friend. She sticks close to me due to still being new to the surface. You brought it from the dungeon? Tioni said, surprised. Not including the Ganesha Familia, wasn't the purpose of all adventurers preventing monsters from reaching the surface? Her. Huh. Bell gestures down to Sif. Sif is a female. The Amazoness raised an eyebrow at that. And how do you know that? I checked. You checked. I checked, Bell repeated as to the side. Sif gave the armored adventurer a look of annoyance. It understands us, Tioni thought, noting how the wolf's expression shifted from time to time. The shift was small, almost unnoticeable due to how unchanging the wolf's face was. Somehow, finding out this discovery made her forget the implications of exactly how Bell knew Sif's gender. Hey! A familiar voice to Tioni called out. Looking up ahead, Tioni saw that they had arrived at the front entrance of the mansion, where standing by the said entrance was Ace, donned in her gear, along with two familiar faces. The one who called out to Tioni was an Amazoness like her. Like all Amazonesses, she wore revealing clothing consisting of only a strip of cloth around her chest and a perio around her waist. And like Tioni, she has brown hair and eyes and was barefooted. Tioni easily recognized the girl as her younger twin sister, Tiona Hiriot. The other person was a young female easily identified as an elf from her pointed ears. Her golden yellow hair was tied into a ponytail with her bangs hanging over her blue eyes. She wore a rosette pink cape on top of a white shirt with a purple bow hanging from the collar and pink corset dress. This was fellow Familia member, Lafia Voridis. Ace, Tiona, Lafia. Tioni addressed the three as she walked up to them. Where are you all heading off to? Dungeon. Ace answered with a single word. We caught Ace here trying to go out on her own, Tiona explained. So Lafia and I are going with her. She must want to test out her new strength, Tioni deduced. While it hadn't been made public yet, Ace had leveled up to LV 6. Loki had made a big deal out of it and planned to throw a feast in celebration later. Nevertheless, everyone was happy for the blonde's achievement as those closest to her knew how much her lack of progress had been bothering her, especially after her battle with the red-haired tamer. By the way, Lafia spoke up as she turns to the armored adventurer standing next to Tioni, as well as taking notice of the gray wolf beside said adventurer. Who this? Ah! Before Tioni could speak, Tiona exclaims in surprise as she points at the knight. You're the guy who socked Bet at the pub that one night. I'm sorry, Bell apologized. HM? Why are you apologizing? Tiona asked, tilting her head a little. He's your friend, isn't he? Whoa, déjà vu. Tioni thought to herself, recognizing the situation in front of her. Oh, it's fine. Bet's a big boy, he can take a punch or two, Tiona said, waving off Bell's concern. So, what brings you over to the Twilight Manor? I had info that your goddess wanted, Bell said, having no need to hide anything. I also came here to get back my gauntlet. Gauntlet? Bell raised up his gauntlet in response. That's the gauntlet, Miss Ace. Lafia began, recognizing the piece of equipment, having seen it from Ace's room. Tioni had seen it too, having seen Ace taking extra special care of it. So the owner of that gauntlet was this guy? The gauntlet is his, Ace explained. I just picked it up. I see dash. A loud voice spoke up just as Lafia finished speaking. Turning, everyone saw coming from the dining hall was a glaring Bet pointing straight at Bell. You're that bastard from the pub. Bell Cranel, nice to meet you. Bell politely introduced himself, seemingly not noticing the fierce glare the werewolf was sending at him. I don't give a damn about your name, Bet shouted as he stomped on over to the knight and glared down at him, standing over a few inches at best. The armored adventurer didn't seem the least bit intimidated, though it was hard to tell due to the armor and helmet. Seeing the hostility the werewolf was showing towards Bell, Sif let out a growl and looked ready to pounce. But before she could do just that, Bell gestures for her to stand down, which she reluctantly does. Who's the mutt? Bet asked, noticing the monster. The said monster glared at the werewolf and Bet glared back in response. Like you're one to talk, Tiona said, pointing out how Bet and Sif were both wolves. What was that? Bet exclaims, now glaring at the Amazonas. I should get going, Bell said, turning to Ace and the others as he said that. He couldn't keep Lily waiting forever. Ace nodded in understanding. They were all adventurers after all, minus Sif of course. Hold it right there. Before Bell could even reach the doors, Bet went and grabbed his shoulder. You're not going anywhere, tin head. I've got a score to settle with you. If this is about that night at the pub, I apologize for spilling that drink on you. It truly was an accident. Bell was quick to apologize, but the werewolf would have none of that. Forget the drink. I'm not letting you walk away after the potshot you gave me, Bet said. His pride would not allow some no-name wannabe knight to just walk away unpunished. Me in the courtyard right now. I refuse, came Bell's instant reply, surprising everyone at how fast his response was. What? Bet shouts in both anger and surprise, having not expected the armored adventurer to refuse so quickly. I have no reason to fight you, it would simply be a waste of time to do so for both you and me, Bell said, having absolutely no reason to fight the werewolf. In his mind, such a fight with no benefits besides stroking one's ego was a complete waste of time for both him and the werewolf. Thus, the sooner he refused, the sooner both can get back to their own lives. Unfortunately, Bet did not share the same thoughts as Bell, focusing on a part of what Bell had said earlier. Waste of time. What did you say? Bet practically roared as he tried to attack Bell only for the Hiriut sisters to quickly grab and hold him down. I think it's best if you leave right away, Lafia said, looking nervously at the very pissed-off werewolf. This was probably the angriest she's seen Bet be since joining the Familia. Bell simply nodded in agreement, gesturing for Sif to follow. The knight and the wolf soon took their leave, promptly ignoring the angry werewolf cursing for the knight to come back and face him like a man. The undead never looked back. It was official, Lily thought to herself. This was the absolute worst. You got it, supporter? Canoe said, he and his usual posse +2 surrounding her. Just drag your tin-head friend down to the 10th floor and we'll handle the rest. Got it. Got it, Lily said, trying not to let out how much she didn't want to do this. Lily knows what she has to do. Good. Canoe smiled, that same punchable smile as always. The raccoon person just had one of those faces one wanted to punch in. And don't worry, we promise to help you before things get too hectic. Liar? Lily instantly thought, already knowing that the raccoon person was lying through his teeth. Canoe was just like every other adventurer she knew, looking down at her just because she was a supporter and thus didn't have the strength to oppose him. And because she couldn't oppose him, it made her stuck in this situation. She didn't have to do this. Despite what little pride she had left, she didn't have to listen to them and could have just run to Bell for help. But, Lily thought as she nervously glances over to the two adventurers accompanying Canoe's group. She didn't know them personally, this being the first she's ever seen them, but apparently, they were the reason behind this whole setup. The only useful information she could get was that the two were from the Iclos Familia, and that alone was already setting alarms in the Palam's head. While she didn't know much, she's heard that the Iclos Familia dealt with some shady business. Some even said that they dealt dealings with the black market, though there wasn't any proof to support such a claim. Even then, it didn't take a genius to see that these two members were bad news. The quality of their equipment also told Lily that they were also high-class adventurers. He's late, Lily mutters under her breath as she waited by the entrance of Babel Tower. Canoe and his gang plus the two Iclos Familia members had long since gone ahead into the dungeon, so she was just here waiting for Bell and Sif. While annoyed, she was happy. The longer she waited meant the longer she didn't have to do this. Wait, why am I worried about that idiot? Lily thought to herself before shaking her head of such thoughts. Get a hold of yourself, Lilaruka Arde. He's just another adventurer. It's his fault for attracting the wrong attention. That's right, Bell Cranel was an adventurer, and all adventurers looked down on supporters like her. I knew sticking with him was bad news. I should have ended our contract as soon as I had the chance. Lily thought to herself, but what's done is done. Right now, she has to focus on how she'll get out of this situation alive. Really, it's his own fault for attracting the wrong kind of attention, him and that stupid mutt of his. Lily mutters to herself again as she thinks about to do. Lily, said Palam, raises her head up to see just the person she was just talking about waving at her. And as always, by his side was that canine friend of his. You're late, Lily exclaims, trying to act natural. Hee, sorry. There was something I had to do this morning, Bell said, rubbing the back of his head bashfully. Really, with the way this man acted, it was hard to believe that he was an actual adventurer. You could have at least told Lily beforehand. Sorry, it just suddenly came up last night, so I had no way of informing you. Lily sighs. Well, at least you're finally here. You really shouldn't keep a lady waiting, Master Bell. Sorry. Apologizing once again, the knight gestures towards the dungeon. Shall we get going now? Lily nodded and the three soon entered the dungeon. As they walked down, the Palam steeled her nerves and spoke. Master Bell, the knight turned to her. Lily suggests we stick to the 10th floor today. While I don't doubt you and Miss Sif's abilities, I still feel uneasy going to the middle floors with so few party members. Lily mentally crossed her fingers, hoping for the armored adventurer to follow her words. Okay, the knight said after a moment of thinking. It is better to be safe than sorry. Yeah, Lily said unenthusiastically whilst looking away, glad that the knight had agreed to her words, yet at the same time wasn't. The rest of the trip down was uneventful and silent. Any skirmishes then encountered were swiftly taken care of by Bell, having gone silent the second he entered the dungeon, as he always was, with Sif providing support here and there. It had barely been half an hour when they finally reached the 10th floor. Lily mentally wished it had taken them longer to get here, something she noticed. Why am I so reluctant to do this? Lily thought to herself as she looked around, trying to spot any signs of Canoe and his gang. Just why was she so hesitant to go through with this? The armored adventurer was an adventurer. All adventurers looked down at supporters like her. And just like any— yes, that's the only reason why she was still with this armored adventurer. Lily wasn't just a supporter. She was a thief. No, more like a swindler. Ever since that day, the elderly couple running that flower shop rejected her after an incident with her fellow Soma Familia member. She did what she had to do to survive. As a supporter, she targeted high-income adventurers and stole whatever was worth money from them. She used whatever she stole, money or items, in order to make her own life a little easier. In her mind, she didn't see the wrongness in it. Ever since she was young, whatever earnings she made herself, other adventurers would simply take from her. So it was completely justifiable to steal from them. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, they say. Despite the act she displays, it was not hard to see that Lily hated her life. She despised being a part of the Soma Familia which she had been born into. She barely remembered what her parents looked like, having been quite young when they died in the dungeon, but she didn't care. Her only concern was raising enough money to leave the Soma Familia, and she did whatever it took to achieve that. She wasn't like the others, intoxicated by the godly liquor that the god, Soma, created. Perhaps back when she was younger, she too had craved for the heavenly beverage, but as of right now, she despised it just as much as she did her fellow Soma members. She wanted nothing to do with it, but she was powerless. She didn't have what it took to be a proper adventurer and thus led to her fate as a supporter. But that didn't stop Lily from trying to achieve her goals. And so she stole, lied, played dirty tricks, she did whatever she had to do to survive. She did whatever it took so that one day, she could leave the Soma Familia and finally be free. And yet, why is it that I can't bear the thought of Bell getting hurt? Lily thought as she watched the knight and his wolf companion take care of a group of orcs. It didn't make sense. All adventurers were greedy backstabbers that care little for supporters like her. Bell was no different, as he even had the audacity to take items from corpses. Not to mention the situation she was currently in was all the knight's fault. Lily had no doubt that if Bell knew her secret, he would betray her. So in turn, wasn't it better to do the betraying than being the betrayed? So why? Why was it that she can't stop worrying about the knight in dirty armor? Why was she so reluctant to betray him like this? Just what made him so different from other adventurers? Lily. Slash. The sound of metal rending flesh snapped the secret palum from her thoughts as she blinks and sees a slain imp at her feet. Looking up, she sees the person she had been thinking about standing over her, brandishing his sword to get rid of the blood on it. In the back, Sif was alone dealing with the monsters. Bell had separated from the wolf in order to help her. "Are you okay, Lily?" "Ah. I think I'll call you Lily." So that's it, Lily thought as it finally made sense to her. Just what made Bell Cranel different from all the other adventurers she usually knew. Such a question was stupid, for the answer was obvious. As the words Bell had spoken to her back when they first worked together, the Palum thought back to her experience with the armored adventurer. To their strange meeting. How he easily dislocated that man's jaw. How scared she was when the knight emitted such killing intent. How unnerving it was when the knight went silent whenever there was danger nearby. The adventurer known as Bell Cranel was mysterious and dangerous. Someone she was better off cutting ties with. And yet, if you're having difficulty finding work, why not join Sif and I on our quest? And yet, she didn't. By sticking with him, the knight showed her the world beyond the walls of Ororio. Something she had dreamed about doing once she was free from the Soma Familia. She recalled how beautiful the outside world was, and how the knight seemed to bask in the rays of the sun. She recalled the quest she went on with the knight and how grateful the village was to them for killing the monsters threatening them. She recalls the many times how kind the armored adventurer was with her, aloof as he was. How he split their earnings 50-50 when others would leave her with little earnings. How he treated her to delicious meals when others would simply give her sloppy leftovers. How strange he was whenever he wasn't fighting. And most importantly, "Have a good night, Lily. You're too kind for your own good," Lily says mostly to herself. Bell tilts his head at Lily, confused by her words. Taking in a deep breath before breathing out, Lily looks up at the knight in grimy armor. As much as she wanted to deny it, she had to face the facts. She, Lilaruka Arde, had grown to like this strange adventurer. Really, why couldn't you have been like every other adventurer? Otherwise this wouldn't be so hard. Lily thought to herself before resolving herself. "Master Bell, you need to take Miss Sif and run." Like Lily expected, the knight was confused by her sudden words. "Those guys, they're after Miss Sif. They made Lily take you down here to lure you into a trap." Lily, too panicked to explain properly, looked around frantically to spot any signs of Canoe and his group. "Lily, calm down." Bell motioned for the Palum to calm down. "What are you talking about?" Lily is sorry, Master Bell." Lily apologized, lowering her head in shame. "I didn't want to do it, but they forced me to." "What do you mean?" Bell asked, still confused. "Members from Lily's familia, the Soma Familia, are planning on capturing Miss Sif in order to sell her to the black market," Lily explained before grabbing Bell's shield arm. "Quickly, we have to grab Miss Sif and run before dash." Lily didn't get to finish as the sound of Sif barking drew both Lily's and Bell's attention. Sif, who had been fighting monsters while Lily spoke with the knight, now stood against a small group of 5 orcs. But such a thing wasn't what alerted them. No, it was the fact that more orcs were soon appearing, surrounding the group. "We're surrounded," Bell stated the obvious, but didn't seem that alarmed as he looked around cautiously. Lily, on the other hand. "Why are there so many orcs?" Lily looked around, confused as to why there were so many monsters converging to their location. And that's when she saw it. From the corner of her eyes, she spotted what looked like a clump of meat which spewed out a foul scent. Lily quickly identified the thing as an item used to attract monsters. As soon as she knew that, did she realize that the current situation was Canoe's trap. Now, A voice spoke up as coming out from behind one of the trees of the floor was the raccoon person, soon followed by his gang as they all appeared from their hiding spots. "We can't have you informing the metal man here about our plans now," Little Miss Supporter Canoe said, smiling arrogantly as usual. "Not like it matters now since you're already caught in our trap." "Canoe!" Lily exclaimed, identifying the raccoon man. She took note of how the orcs seemingly ignored him and his gang. "Must be the work of some sort of item." "You know him?" Bell asked while making sure to keep an eye on the orcs surrounded them. "He's the one who set this all up," Lily said while looking around, trying to look for an escape route. "It's no use running," Canoe said as his boys threw out more of those clumps of meat to the ground. "These sacks of meat are by now attracting the attention of every monster on this entire floor. Soon you'll be completely surrounded." "Damn it," Lily cursed under her breath, wishing she had made up her mind about helping Bell much sooner. Then they wouldn't be in this situation. She knows Bell is strong, but she didn't know if he was strong enough to take on a whole floor of monsters, even with Sif's aid. KH. With a grunt, Bell clocked a club strike from an orc before pushing the monster back and quickly beheaded it with a quick swipe of his sword. After doing that, did he then turn over towards Canoe and his men. "Why are you doing this?" the knight asks. "Don't take this personally, oh fellow adventurer of mine, but we were hired by some guys to snatch that wolf from you," Canoe arrogantly explained, confident that there was nothing the knight could do as, behind him, his men were preparing equipment used to capture monsters. "I don't have a clue as to what it is, but the guys paying us for this offered us quite a large amount of money. We just couldn't refuse." The raccoon man then turned his head over to Lily. "And I do apologize for getting you caught up in this, supporter. But be happy that you died for the sake of a fellow familia member. This son of a dash." Lily didn't get a chance to finish her thoughts as she was forced to jump in order to dodge an attack from another orc. In retaliation, she fired a bolt from her ballista and watched as it pierced the orc's eye. Its cry of pain seemed to echo throughout the entire floor, which somehow spurred the others into further action, becoming enraged. Because she was so small, Lily didn't see that in the distance. More monsters were beginning to appear from imps, bats, and even a couple of infant dragons. Is this really the end? Lily couldn't help but think as the number of monsters appearing kept growing around them. To be killed by a horde of monsters while caught in the trap of an adventurer. Perhaps this was karma finally arriving to take what's due from her. Perhaps this was payback for all the adventurers she's tricked over the years. Lily knew she wasn't a good person, so maybe this is what she deserves. At least, Lily glances behind her where she sees Bell continuing to fight against the horde of monsters, in order to get to Sif, who had become separated from the group, due to how many monsters there were. At least, in the end, Lily wasn't a liar. Ever since that day where her world became much duller, she lied and stole in order to survive. But in the end, at least she didn't lie to the one person who showed her genuine kindness. The situation was bleak, but for some reason, Lily had confidence that Bell would make it out of this just fine. But first, at the very least, Lily has to help Master Bell save Miss Sif, Lily said as she reached into her coat and pulled out a magic sword she had stolen from a previous adventurer long ago. She kept the thing for emergencies only since magic swords didn't last very long. But if she could help Bell, then losing such a thing was worth the price. Master B dash. "Lily, duck." As soon as Lily heard those words did her instincts take over, and she ducked just as a flash of steel flew right over her head, followed by a rain of blood from 4 dead orcs behind her. Looking up, the Palum saw Bell now wielding the claymore that should have been in Sif's hands or mouth. Looking over to the wolf herself, she saw the canine monster now weaponless as she used her claws and fangs to fight back against the surrounding monsters. It took a moment for Lily to realize that Sif had thrown her sword over to Bell for him to use. Immediately after the knight dispatched the orcs behind the Palum did he run over to Lily and handed her a roll of cloth and what Lily recognized as charcoal. "Wrap this up and place it over your nose and mouth. If you got any herbs on hand, add those too." Bell's instructions were swift as he placed the items in Lily's hands. "Master dash." "Hurry," Bell interrupted her as he summoned forth a flame in his left hand. Confused as to what the knight was planning, Lily did as told and quickly wrapped the cloth around the charcoal before wrapping the whole thing around her mouth, making sure she had her nose covered too. Once Lily was done did she see Bell hold up the flame before clenching it, seemingly dispersing the flame. This confused the Palum as she thought the armored adventurer was about to execute one of his chantless fire spells, until he suddenly breathed out what could only be described as a dense poison mist. Compared to the stuff Lily used in her poison bags, the stuff Bell was spewing was so dense that it was practically a dense fog as Bell breathed the stuff out like a dragon breathing fire. In a matter of seconds, the monsters surrounding them were enveloped in a dense poison fog. What the fuck? Lily couldn't help but think as she zeroed in on the fact that Bell had breathed out poison, as in the thing that kills people when it gets into their system. On a side note, Lily finally understood why the knight had told her to cover her nose and mouth. She also figured out that the charcoal was used as added protection. Though, as she saw monsters dropping dead by the second around her, she wasn't sure the piece of cloth would be able to protect her. Had Lily been a part of a high-class familia, she would have noted that Bell's poison was even deadlier than what was found on the lower floors. Wah! Lily let out a cry of surprise when Bell, who had stopped breathing poison, had suddenly run up and grabbed her, carrying her plus her bag over his shoulder as if she were a featherweight. "Close your eyes and hold your breath," Bell said to her before he charged into the poison fog he created before she could let out a word of protest. Doing as she was told again, Lily squeezed her eyes shut and held her breath. Looks like even Bell wasn't confident that the cloth and charcoal could fully protect her from the poison. Asterisk cough 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 asterisk. What is this? Through the dense poison mist, Lily could make out the sound of Canoe and his group coughing, no doubt having inhaled the poisonous mist. She honestly wished she could see the condition Canoe was in right now, if not just to tickle her sadistic side, but was held back due to the very poisonous mist surrounding her as she felt her skin starting to itch, telling the Palum that not only was the poison mist highly poisonous, but also acidic. And this all came from Bell? Lily thought, wondering just how was the armored adventurer was still able to talk after breathing slightly acidic poisonous mist. "We're out, open your eyes," she heard Bell said, and she did just that, gasping for air as she saw that she and the knight were out of the poison fog. Coming to a stop, Lily was then set down by the said knight before being handed what Lily easily recognized as an antidote. Looking up at Bell, he said, "Better safe than sorry." Seeing what the knight was implying, Lily practically tore off the cloth covering her and was about to chug down the antidote when suddenly, Bell held up his shield and blocked an incoming arrow, surprising Lily as she cried out in alarm, nearly dropping the antidote. Asterisk cough cough. Asterisk. Appearing from the poison fog which was quickly dispersing were the men from the Iklos Familia that accompanied Canoe and his group. One of them was holding a bow and arrow, telling Lily just who had shot earlier. "And those are?" Bell asked, readying his sword. "Those are the guys who made Canoe and his men set up all this. They're the ones after Miss Sif," Lily informed while hiding behind the armored adventurer. "I see. Bastard. What the fuck are you?" one of the two rudely asked, holding up an impressive-looking broadsword fitting for someone of his level while his companion readied his bow. But that's as far as they were able to do as they dropped to their knees and started coughing again. It got to the point where they even started coughing blood. Bell didn't answer the dying man as he instead said, "Sif." From the remaining poisonous mist appeared the wolf herself, jumping the Iklos member with the bow and proceeded to tear his throat apart with her teeth. The pained cries of the man seemed to echo through the entire floor as he tried to push Sif off to no avail. "You damn dash." The other Ilkalos member stood up and raised his sword, attempting to aid his fellow familia member. Stab! Only to let out a shocked cry as Bell appeared behind man, covering the distance in the blink of an eye, and plunged his sword straight through his back and out his chest. It was a well-executed backstab, one that would make a professional assassin proud. The man tried to say something, but his mouth was too filled with blood as Bell proceeded to free his sword by kicking the man off. He was dead by the time he hit the ground. As for the other Iklos member, his head had long since been torn straight off and thrown away as Sif's mouth was a literal bloody mess. Lily would never admit it out loud, but she may have slightly pissed herself. "Sif, are you okay?" Completely ignoring the dead bodies on the ground, Bell went over to the wolf to check her condition while pulling out another antidote in case the wolf needed it. While he did that, Lily swallowed down the bile gathering in her throat before looking around and was greeted with the sight of a sea of dead monsters. To the far left was Canoe and his men, they too dead. "You killed them?" Lily spoke up, getting Bell and Sif to turn to her as she let out her disbelief. "Holy shit! You actually killed them?" "Yes." Bell nodded as if it were nothing, sending a chill down Lily's spine at how casual the knight sounded. He then titled his head after placing the broadsword on his back and asked, "Was I not supposed to?" "To even ask that?" Lily shook her head in disbelief at the armored adventurer as she made her way over to Canoe's dead body. The life had faded from the raccoon man's eyes as blood was spilling from his mouth, eyes, and nose with his men and the many monsters around them being in the same condition. Seeing the man who had constantly abused her for years like this. "You know what? No, this is fine. This is good," Lily said as feelings of sick satisfaction and anger bubbled up inside of her. Before she knew it, she was kicking and stomping on the man's corpse. This guy deserved what he got. Good fucking riddance. She didn't know what had come over her. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but her body continued to move on its own. Perhaps she was trying to cope with what had just transpired. But seeing the man who was one of many that abused and wronged her for years like this caused the years of frustration and anger she had kept bottled up inside of her to come bursting out. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Years of treating Lily like trash, and look at you now. Lily shouted as she angrily stomped on Canu's dead body, grinding her boot against the corpse's face. Stomp, 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 stomp. You're nothing to Lily. You hear me? Nothing. Lily. Just as the Palom was about to kick the literal dead man's face in, an almost monotone yet gentle voice spoke up, making Lily pause and slowly turn over towards Bell and Sif, the two watching her. She didn't know what kind of face the armored adventurer must be making right now, but using Sif as a reference, Lily guessed his current expression would have been passive. That's enough, Bell said, his tone monotone yet gentle. It somehow was enough to extinguish the anger inside Lily as she slowly started to calm down. Sparing one last look at Canu and his now-dead gang, Lily made her way back to Bell and Sif, making sure not to trip on the many dead monsters on the ground. If Lily didn't know any better, she would have guessed that the knight might have killed every monster on this floor with that poison mist of his. Sorry you had to see that. Lily apologized once she made it back, lowering her head down in shame. Lily kind of lost control there. It's okay, Bell said. Perhaps it was because there was no longer anything threatening them that Bell was more talkative now despite still being in the dungeon. Crossing his arms, Bell looked at Lily and said, "You knew about this." Unable to say anything out of guilt, Lily settled on simply nodding her head. "You led Sif and me here into a trap." Once again, the Palom nodded her head, afraid to look at the knight in the eye. Slit. Off topic, just how did the armored adventurer even see through that helmet of his? There was barely enough room to slide a coin in. Lily should have told Master Bell from the beginning, Lily said, head still lowered. Despite having feared for her life if she so much as argued against Canu, Lily should have trusted Bell more to perhaps help her. At this point, she would make no excuses in order to get out of this. Lily is willing to accept any punishment you give to her. A punishment, huh? The knight hummed to himself, looking down towards Sif where the two began to have a silent conversation. How was it they were able to communicate so well together despite only knowing each other for less than half a month? Lily would never know. "I'm not going to punish you, Lily." "Huh?" Lily looked up at the knight in surprise, having not expected him to say that. "Why would I punish you?" Bell asked with a title of his head. Because Lily led you down here to trap you. I led you down here without saying a word until the last minute. But the fact that you did end up telling me is a fact, Bell said. Honestly, if you hadn't told me about this, I would have punished you. If there's one thing I cannot abide, it's betrayal. For a second, Lily thought she saw a red glowing eye appear from the slit of Bell's helmet when he said that last word, but it disappeared as soon as it appeared. She didn't know if it was her imagination or not, but the Palom got the message that the knight did not tolerate betrayal. However, it's because you spoke up that those that planned this trap exposed themselves earlier than planned. A trap is only effective if one has the element of surprise. Somehow, Lily got the distinct impression that Bell was speaking from experience. You chose to help me instead of them. So, I'm not going to punish you, Lily. It's thanks to you that Sif is still safe. Lily can't accept that, Lily said, shaking her head. In her mind, the fact that she didn't speak up sooner left lingering guilt inside of her. I lied to you and got you into this mess, Master Bell. Lily insists that dash. My decision is final, Bell interrupted her. If you're so adamant about receiving punishment, then you should talk to my goddess. Your goddess, Lily repeated, confused. Why would she have to speak to Bell's deity? I mean, were you planning on returning to your familia after? Bell trailed on as he looked over towards Canu and his dead group. Following his gaze, Lily let in, "Ah." Understanding what the knight was saying, Canu and his group, fellow members of the same familia, had just been killed. No doubt her captain would take notice of their absence and send others to investigate in the future. Something she obviously didn't want to be involved in. I think it would be best to lay low for a while, Bell said, and Lily simply nodded in agreement. He then asked, do you have a safe place to hide? If not, then I can help. Lily has a safe house that only a few know about, Lily said, as the few she mentioned about did not include a single Soma Familia member, meaning she was safe for now. Lily's burdened Master Bell enough for today. I'll be fine. I see, good, Bell said before slowly turning over to the dead monsters around them. Perhaps we should get started extracting all the magic stones from these monsters? Ah! Lily let out another noise as she took into account the number of monsters around them. She can already feel her hands cramping at how much work she had to do. Well then, best we get started, Bell said as he went over to one of Canu's men and flipped it over so that the body was face down. Master Bell, what are you doing? Lily asked as a sense of déjà vu came over her. Pillaging the bodies. Bell's answer came out so casually that it threw off Lily, who looked at the knight in disbelief. You go ahead and start extracting all the magic stones. Don't worry, I'll dispose of the bodies once I'm done. not once looking away from what he was doing. Bell proceeded to take out bags of coin, potions, and anything else Canoe and his men had on them, stashing them away in his many pouches. As for any weapons they had on them, he set those to the side. Lily had the faintest feeling that the knight was going to make her carry all the weapons in her bag. Lily just stood there, watching in disbelief as the knight continued to defile the bodies of Canoe and his men. She then turned to Sif to see what the canine's reaction was, but found the wolf dragging the bodies of the two Iklos members over to the knight, no doubt so the said knight could loot them too. Just as the Palum was about to call out to the armored adventurer, her mind suddenly remembered something. "You're just going to take that?" Lily asked, sending a questioning look at Bell as she stared at the spear in his hands. Sparing a glance at the dead body next to them, Bell gave out a cold reply. "He won't be needing it." The adventurer known as Bell Cranel was a strange, but kind man. Really, sometimes he was just too kind for his own good. She sometimes wonders if his kindness was how he befriended someone like Sif. And yet, that same kind man had so easily killed people without so much as batting an eye, not that she could tell in the first place because of the helmet and all, and was now looting the bodies without a care in the world while his wolf companion assisted him. Finally turning away from the knight, Lily got to work on extracting the magic stones from all the monsters around them, doing her best to ignore the sounds of Bell gathering the bodies. It wasn't easy as the entire floor had gone oddly silent, making even the tiniest of sounds sound louder than it should. Even as she moved her knife around, tearing through the flesh of monsters, did not help as she moved with surgical precision. She knew she was good at removing magic stones from monsters, but the silence of the floor made her more aware of it as she hardly made a sound. Whoosh! Seconds later, the sound of fire followed by the scent of burnt flesh filled the air. She already knew just what the knight had done, yet she still couldn't help but stop what she was doing and turn her head around. There Bell stood with Sif by his side, standing impassively over the burning pile of dead bodies, watching as the flames consumed everything. The clothes were the first to go, followed by the skin melting off, revealing bones. Not even a second later did the bones start to break down so fast that Lily hardly noticed it had been over half a minute when the only thing remaining before the night was a pile of ashes. The process had been so fast that Lily wasn't even given the chance to feel any form of disgust or sickness. Only now did Lily question just how strong those flames of his were. Not even giving the ashes a second glance, the knight pulled out a knife and went over to a random monster, digging out its magic stone. From then on, the armored adventurer helped the Palum extract every last magic stone. It was a silent process with neither of them speaking up. Before she even realized it, the last of the monsters had disintegrated into nothing, leaving no evidence at what had just transpired here. Lily couldn't help but feel like they had just gotten rid of a crime scene. "Let's return to the surface," Bell said once he was finished putting the last of the magic stones and pillaged weapons into Lily's bag. Now the Palum couldn't help but feel like she was an accomplice to a criminal. "I just witnessed my employer kill members from my own familia as well as 2 men from an infamous one, and now I'm lugging in my bag the only pieces of evidence that could pinpoint what exactly happened," Lily thought to herself as she walked behind Bell and Sif, staring at the back of the former. Bell Cranel was a strange man. There was no doubt that the kindness he displayed was genuine, yet he doesn't even bat an eye to killing and pillaging corpses. The contradictory between the two was so vast that Lily had a hard time wrapping her head around it. Kind yet didn't hesitate to commit questionable actions. She couldn't help but wonder just what exactly happened to make Bell the way he is now. "Lily," said girl was brought out of her thoughts, looking up to Bell who was facing her. "Yes?" Lily responded, a bit awkward. She was walking with a murderer after all. She would have been more bothered if the people Bell killed hadn't been a part of Soma Familia. It just goes to show how much she hated her familia. "I don't think we'll be having money problems for a while with this." Bell patted one of his pouches which contained the wallets of Canoe and his men. How such a small thing could hold so much coin, Lily would never know. "So, I was wondering if you would like to accompany Sif and me on another quest." A quest. A quest to the outside world, beyond the walls of Orario. Thinking about it now, the way Lily viewed Bell all started when she accompanied him on that previous quest before. And now, here he is, doing the same thing as last time. Bell Cranel was far from the nicest person. Lily had seen that firsthand. He was no naive young man seeking fame within the dungeon, unlike most of the adventurers here in the city. No, he was the exact opposite. While adventurers sought out the dungeon, Bell seemed to long for the outside world. At least, that's the impression Lily has of the knight. Really, what a strange person he is, Lily thought as she pulled down her hood and dispelled her Cinderella skill, getting rid of her dog ears and tail, revealing her true race to Bell and Sif for the very first time since partnering up with them. While the helmet hid what Bell looked like, Lily had the feeling that the knight wasn't at all surprised to see her like this. "Lily would love to," the Palum girl said with a smile. A part of her still didn't know if sticking with Bell Cranel was safe, what with his strange and sometimes scary demeanor and confusing set of skills. But if there's one thing Lily was sure of, it's that being with Bell was way better than working with any other adventurer. Hestia heard the door of the underground room opening and closing as she sat on the sofa reading. Marking the page she was on before closing the book, she sets it down to her side and turns her head in time to see Bell entering the room along with Sif, both slightly covered in blood, more so with Sif as it was all over her mouth. "Welcome home, Bell, Sif," Hestia said, trying to put on her best smile. She had been mostly cooped up inside all day, trying to reorganize her thoughts, and has calmed down since then. "Rough day today?" Hestia asked, gesturing to the blood on them, which no doubt came from monsters. "I'm home," Bell said before looking down at himself and Sif. "And you can say that." Why did it feel like there was more to what Bell had just said? "I probably shouldn't think about it too hard," Hestia thought to herself. After all, tonight was going to be another long night. "You must be hungry," Hestia said, gesturing down to the table where a plate of potato croquettes as well as some cheese and bread she had managed to obtain sat. Not long after she finished speaking did Sif grab one of the croquettes and ate it. "Sif certainly is." Bell, taking off his helmet, smiled with a small laugh. "As for me, I am fine. No need to be shy. There's enough for everyone," Hestia said, having made sure that there was an equal amount of food for everyone. While she wasn't a perfectionist, her anxiety for what she was about to learn later had affected her actions. She just couldn't sit still as she wondered just what gruesome info she would hear from Bell soon. "No, it's fine," Bell said while in the middle of taking off his equipment. "I do not need to eat." "What do you mean?" Hestia asked, confused. Surely her child must be hungry after a long day in the dungeon. "Ah, I guess I never told you," Bell said, putting aside his greaves before going over and sitting down by the table. "Just as I do not require sleep, I also do not have to eat. Sorry, I'm just now telling you this." "What?" And so began another long, stressful night for Hestia as she once again listened to the tales of Bell Cranel, the chosen undead, while also trying to come to terms that her poor child could no longer eat. Meanwhile, in the dungeon was, as it has always been, a mysterious place. It was common knowledge that the complex labyrinth that laid under Babel Tower was the birthplace of monsters. Before the gods had descended and sealed the nest, monsters would roam the land and wreak havoc. It was only through the actions of heroes and gods that those dark times were long gone. Any monsters found on the surface were merely descendants of monsters that had managed to stay alive and remain on the surface, while the rest remained trapped within the underground labyrinth. It was well known that Oreo City was the place in the world with an active dungeon. Because of this, people from all over the world would travel to the dungeon city seeking fame and glory. Thus were adventurers born, and with the gods was familias formed. But even to this day was the dungeon an unknown mystery. Thanks to familias of old, it was known that the dungeon had 59 known floors, and possibly many more still left unexplored. Beyond that, people knew next to nothing. Not even the gods knew just what exactly was the dungeon. But what many choose to ignore was that the dungeon was alive. It would spawn monsters from the walls and ceiling and would repair itself should it sustain damage. Not only that, but it had an immense hatred of the gods, which was why gods of today didn't venture alongside their children, unlike how it was during the times of Zeus and Hera Familia. Nevertheless, the underground labyrinth was alive and held many secrets. And currently, one of those many secrets was trying to break free. Boom, boom, boom. From within the walls of the dungeon in an unknown floor, the sounds of something banging against the walls were heard. It's common knowledge that monsters spawn from the walls, yet whatever was trying to break out was having difficulty. Almost as if the dungeon itself was trying to hold back whatever was trying to break free. Boom, boom, boom. Finally, after a while, the banging stopped. Whatever was trying to break out had given up. If it were possible, the dungeon would have sighed in relief. Many secrets laid within this underground labyrinth, but not all of those secrets were its own. It had felt it once again. A spark of the flame. A flame from an old and forgotten age. A flame of chaos. No doubt the thing that laid hidden within the walls of the dungeon had sensed it too and reacted to it. But it would not allow it. It would not allow that thing to be set free, lest it endangers its children. It didn't know just where or what were causing these sparks, but in its current condition, it could not take care of it. All it could do was leave it alone and focus on keeping this monster from escaping its clutches. Many secrets laid hidden within the dungeon, and sometimes, it's best to let those secrets remain hidden.